Hi, everyone. So, my name is Catherine, and I'm the owner and the creator of Sew Your Bag. So, tonight we're doing a live sew along. It's actually part one of the live sew along for the March bag that was in the March box. This will be a three-part sew along. Tonight we'll be prepping, which means we'll be going through some interfacing, how to attach the interfacing, and basically preparing all of the material necessary to sew the bag, along with working through the construction of the straps. Part two will be putting together the exterior of the bag, and part three will be putting together the lining and then putting the lining together with the exterior. So part day three will be all of the pieces put together. So this is going to be done over 3 days. Don't worry, it's going to be recorded, or it is being recorded. So then that way you can come back and look at it at another time. So while I'm getting ready, and people are jumping on, I'm just going to make sure that I have all of my connections. I'm not getting any feedback, hopefully, and everybody can hear me just totally fine. So let's see. So, so in good shape. You can hear it. I can hear it, and we're in good shape. So, before I get started, I just want to give you a little bit of information for those of you who don't know. I have a subscription box, which is a bag making subscription box. The purpose of the box is to teach a beginner and aspiring bag maker skills, new skills for some people. Some people, it's just a repeat or it's a refresher course broken down in smaller pieces. So each bag is meant to build skills in some way, as well as introduce you to, from time to time, new hardware. So the subscription box is monthly at this point. So every month there is a different bag and a different pattern that I've written to make sure that I'm sticking true to what I promise. And it contains everything you need to make the bag. So everything that we're doing tonight, all of the material was included in the subscription box. And so along with that, you also get a pattern that was written by me. And then there are other goodies that are included. So let's go over and let's go through what the bag actually is and the construction of the bag so that you can see. So hopefully everybody can see the bag. See a lot of other things on my cutting mat as well, but that's okay. Um, so in the with the bag, all of this, not those, but everything that you see was included. So let me just very quickly just get you guys up here. And if anybody can't hear me, please let me know. I will make sure to hopefully there is sound. So to keep it as simple as possible, I always use Ankara or Ankara inspired fabric. This fabric was the fabric that came in the box. As I mentioned, everything comes in the box. We're also using waterproof canvas, so I've included it for the lining. So if anybody's not used this before, this is wonderful stuff. And then I've used that same waterproof canvas to put an accent piece at the bottom and create a racing stripe kind of effect on the top. So this is a saddle bag, and it does have, and I'll show you, it does have what's called electro black, and I'll include in the description where you can find this hardware, but electro black hardware. And there is hinge connectors, so we'll learn how to install that. Along with that, there is an adjustable strap. So the adjustable strap is actually, or this slider piece is actually attached in such a way that it does function. However, because of the fact that we're using cotton, it tends to readjust. So I'm calling it a faux or false adjustable strap because it gives the illusion that the strap is adjustable even though it's not. When we install this on day 3, I will have you finish by trying on your bag and then putting a marker to your height or the height that you like to carry your handbag. At the end, there is a strap end, and this is a nice one because it's finished on the sides and the bottom, so there's no exposed material. One thing I do like about this bag as well. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if that's Nancy, but you're saying that I'm loud and clear. Um, I will say to you that I am broadcasting within my private group as well as on Facebook. So sometimes I may not know who it is. I get a sense based on the comment, but if you're on Facebook, and I know each time you have to give you may have to give StreamYard access so that I know who you are. But I pretty much know by the comments who people are in my private group. I'm so glad, by the way, it's Sharon. Hi, Sharon. I'm so glad, by the way, that I got my sound issues resolved. It's long story short, I was supposed to go live last night. I know this is maybe oversharing, and I had to reschedule to tonight because I had very bad feedback. So when you heard me twice, and then there was a screeching. So I did change that so that you now only hear me once. So anyway, so in the bag, it's going to have a zippered pocket. So there is a zippered pocket, and we'll learn how to construct that. I put normally the exterior fabric or some contrasting fabric within the zipper portion of it. What's nice is that this is cotton, so I can turn it inside out and I don't have to worry about it. So let me just do that for you so you can actually get a full effect of the interior of the bag. Okay, so this is waterproof canvas. This is what the inside looks like. So that's the contrasting pocket. Purple zipper, electro black pull, and we'll learn how to construct that. There is 2 slip pockets, and we'll talk about how we install this. The nice thing about this pocket is you can put whatever you'd like in it. So if you wanted it 3 sections or 4 sections, you can adjust that, and we'll mention that a little bit when we're installing it. Very simply constructed, honestly and truly. And then what I did when I was installing the flap part, flap meaning F-L-A-P, not flat, but flap to this. We'll be installing that a little lower down on the back of the bag. And when we install this on the back of the bag, lower down, what it will do is it will give us a pocket back here. So if you have like a pen or a lipstick or a lip gloss or something that you want to get to very quick, you can throw it right there in that back pocket. And then when you open your bag, it's right there and you don't have to rummage in your bag. So I'm always looking for a pen. So it'll come in very handy. The other thing about this bag that I want to mention is that a lot of the hardware, most of the hardware is afterthought. And that means that we construct the bag itself with very minimum hardware on it. And what we then do is we attach the hardware to the bag after the bag has come together. So the hinge connectors, we do attach them to the strap, but we do not attach these connectors until after the bag is done. When we attach the lock, this lock mechanism, we will be attaching this piece, but this piece we don't attach. The second piece will not get attached until after the bag is done. The nice thing about this is by not attaching it till after the bag is done, it doesn't get in the way of us, manipulating the bag. And it also does not get scuffed or scratched, right? So by doing that, we're helping to protect the actual hardware from getting scuffed or scratched. So that is going to be it. It's going to be the Ireti Saddle Bag, and Ireti means hope. And in the booklet I wrote, the reason that I called it that is because in my yard I get crocuses, and the crocuses that come up are purple. And so it just gives me hope for another year. We're starting spring. And there's just like so much, now is really for some people, it's, all they're living on is hope because of what's happening in the news. But for other people, they have hope because of things that they have gone through over the last 2 years. So that's why I called it the Ireti uh, Saddle Bag. And so this is what we will be sewing in the sew along. So let's get started. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to pop it in the comments. I can see it on both Facebook and on YouTube. So have no fear. I will get to your comment if I see it. So let's get the material. And I had the material laid out. It's like Murphy's Law. Oh, okay. So we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need fabric. We will need interfacing. And we will also need foam. So I'll be using several pieces of foam because I have foam that's about the right size. In the kit, there was a big piece of foam, and there was also foam that was separate for the straps. So that's what we're going to need. Right. The first thing I'm going to talk about is cutting the fabric. Now, one thing about Ankara fabric is you don't have to be very purposeful about it. You can just cut into it. And however it comes out, because the print is so bold and it may be kind of hard for you to see with this overlay. So I'll just show you the back. But you can see how bold that print is on the back. So it's a big, bold print. So you don't have to be purposeful in cutting it. You can just cut it, and your design is your design, and that's what makes it so beautiful. So what I'm going to do is we're going to cut it, but we're going to cut it in such a way, because I did have somebody in the group ask the question about cutting it with intent, making sure that things line up. For example, if I show you the bag, and I tend to cut with intent only because it comes across better in the picture and for no other reason. Even though the flap is attached, this purple strip looks like it's running straight up. So it makes it look like it's one piece of fabric. If you don't do it this way, this piece could be a little bit, to the left or the right or whatever. But I cut it purposely this way. Normally, I would just cut it random. I did the same thing with the front. It is a little bit off. So if you look at the swiggles, you can see it's a little bit off. But I cut that main purple line with intent. This is known as fussy cutting, when you try to make things line up, especially when they're not, when you're trying to make them join or overlay on each other, and you want them to look like it's one continuous piece of fabric and there are no breaks. So with this fabric also, depending on how you cut it, maybe the purple stripe goes this way, maybe the purple stripe goes that way. However you cut it, it's going to be beautiful, I promise you. So let's take a look at cutting the fabric. So I'm going to cut it with intent, only because somebody asked the question and asked me if I would cut it with intent. So I thought I would do that on the sew along. In the directions, there is a cutting list that tells you exactly how to cut this. So it will tell you how to cut it. And the layout and all the patterns, all of the layout pieces are for the exterior pieces only. I leave everybody to cut the lining and the interfacing people according to interfacing pieces according to the cut list. So there is a cut list provided for all the pieces, but for the exterior specifically, because it is, you always get a yard of fabric. I want to make sure that you know exactly how to cut the fabric so that you get the maximum and you will get all the pieces. If you try to fussy cut it, sometimes you may cut something a little bit wrong and you may not have enough material. So I do include for the exterior only that part of it. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to get my cutting list to make sure I'm not cutting things wrong, because that has happened, believe me. Okay. So the first thing that I always cut is I always cut my straps. And the reason that I cut my straps is to make sure that I have enough material at the end. if you don't cut your straps first and you have a limited amount of material, you may have to piece your straps. So it's up to you how you want to cut this. I always try to cut the straps first, and then I will cut the rest of the fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this in half for right now. And along this edge over here, I'm going to cut my straps. So I'm going to just cut it a little bit over this way. I'm going to cut it, and I'll tell you why. And that's because this edge, I don't have to worry about as much. If you're worried about wasting fabric, then, make sure it's perfectly aligned. But what I try to do is I line up the bottom of the fabric, and I don't worry. And I make sure that I cut a straight line before I actually go through and I cut my straps. So I'm not worried too much because I know I have plenty of fabric here, but you should cut the straps according to the pattern. So I will need 2 pieces for the strap, by the way, because I'll need the bottom piece, and I'll show you that in a minute, and I'll need the top. So I'm going to cut this. So I'm just right now creating that straight edge. That's all I'm doing. And then I'm going to cut my strap. So what's nice is this rule is actually four inches wide, but I don't, which then I can know how far I have to go, but I'm just going to move it over. Now, I don't necessarily need all of this for the strap, but that's okay. I'm going to just cut it anyway. Now, there is this little piece at the bottom. Some people like to include it in their bag. It's up to you how you want to deal with that. I'm not, I don't have any preference, but I will be cutting off the selvage, which is a piece at the bottom, just to even this out. And then I will cut my straps. So let me show you the 2 pieces that you're going to need. So I'm going to cut the smaller piece because in order to make it that faux adjustable strap, there is a smaller piece on the bottom here. So this piece here is it's a little bit shorter because it only goes up to there and we fold it over. Ignore the orange thread. And then there's this longer piece that goes all the way around, goes through and down. So this is a longer piece, and then there's a smaller piece. So you have to cut 2 pieces for your strap. So I'm going to cut the shorter piece, and then I'm not going to really worry too much, but you should cut the longer piece by the dimensions in the pattern. Okay, so that's 1 piece, and that's for the bottom. And this is the other piece, which is a longer piece. Now, I have more than what I need here. So let me just cut off a piece of this. And so I don't need that piece. And now I have my strap. In the back of the pattern, there are little pieces of paper. There is a printed sheet that you can use to cut out and label your pieces. These are going to be my straps, so I'll just clip them together and put them to the side. I'm just checking on my questions to make sure there are none. The next thing we're going to be cutting is we will be cutting the, I guess, let's cut the front and the back, and we'll talk a little bit about how that gets cut. So I'm just setting myself up so I can see your comments as well. So if you're wondering what you're doing, I want to make sure that I see your comments and I see my cutting list. So that's really what I'm doing. And thank you for bearing with me. All right. So now the front and the back that we're going to cut. So this is where I talk about trying to get it aligning the pieces, right? So I can cut the front and the back pieces where I'm cutting them at the same time, right? So I can cut these two pieces and then I'd have the front and the back. But because I want to try to get an aligned piece to make sure that the front and back sort of overlap and look like the pattern, I'm not being overly fussy. Cutting can get very, very particular, I should say. It can get very particular where it perfectly aligns. I'm not going to worry about that. I just want to make sure that this center stripe here, this purple piece, is actually in the center of my bag on the front and the back. So that's really what my focus is going to be, getting this centerpiece perfectly aligned front and the back. So in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to make sure that I find the center. So if I look at this piece where my ruler is laying, that's the center of my piece, right? Because then it's sort of symmetrical on either side. Once I find the center, I'm going to align that piece with the center, with a line on my cutting mat. So I will open this up because I'll need the full, it's a single cut. So don't cut it where it's more than one piece of fabric. We want to cut just one piece of fabric because then we're going to use that one piece of fabric. So it's going to be a single cut. So I'm just going to turn it around right now. All right. So now because I want that single piece or that single cut, and I found my center, so I know exactly where the center is. If you want to, you can fold this to find your center and do as you know, as well as you can to cut it if you would like to. I'm just going to, you know, really eyeball where the center is of this, and I'm going to align it with one of my lines. And I'm just peeking under here to make sure it's the center. I also know that I have a clean edge. So this is my center. The next thing I'm going to do once I find the center is I need to look at the width of my piece. So if this is the center, and let's say the total is 9 inches wide, in order for it to be totally centered when you cut it, you have to make sure that it's half of 9 in one direction and half of 9 in the other direction. So if it was 9 inches wide, and it's not, but if I'm cutting 9 inches wide, what I want to do is I want to say measure 4.5 inches to the left and 4.5 inches to the right, which means that in total I will have 9 inches. And in that case, this will be centered. So looking at the pattern, you're going to take the width measurement and you're going to cut it in half. Once you've cut it in half, what you will do is you will measure whatever that number is, that many inches to the right and that many inches to the left, and then you will get the total for your front and your back. Plus, then you have to measure the height. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to worry about, I'm going to take 2 rulers. I'm going to take this ruler. You can use a marking tool, right? So if you have a marking tool, you can mark your center like this. You can then rotate your ruler, measure across however many you need, place another mark. And I would place a mark at several points on your center line, just so that you can draw a straight line. I have a straight edge here, which makes it easy for me because I did cut off those straps. So that's what I'm going to use. And then I'm going to just measure down and across. So I'm going to get my big ruler and my small ruler. All right. So let's do that. And I'm just using my lines. You can't see my lines probably, but I am using my lines. All right, and then I'm going to measure down. So I measured across a certain amount, and then I have to measure down how many I need. So I'm going to make mine pretty, I don't know. So this is about where I need to be. Okay. And just to make sure I'm not too far off, I'm going to fold back my fabric. So this is tricky, but believe me, if you don't, like I said, normally I would you just cut the fabric. It's not, but somebody did ask, so I just want to make sure that I am helping them out. Okay. So I'm going to cut this way. And I want to make sure that I have it totally aligned at the top. And then I'm going to cut down. So I know that it's straight on either side because I'm aligning my lines. And I know that it's straight. Now you're going to have to hold this pretty tight if you do it this way. You can draw a line, so you can take a marking tool. I would turn it over to the back because it's probably going to be easier to see. And you can draw a line and then cut it out with a scissor. All right, that's another way that you can do it. I always use my rotary cutter, so I'm going to use my rotary cutter for this. Now, of course, it won't get to that edge, but that's okay. I'll come back later and cut it. So it doesn't matter. This could be the front or the back. They're identical, the front and the back. But we'll cut another one. Okay. So that's one piece, and then I'm just going to cut this with my cut line. And I did cut this a little bit bigger so then I can come back and trim it. But, you know, if I was doing it and I wasn't doing it live, I would cut it differently. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean this up a little bit just to make sure that it's totally, so that's the center, and I'm just going to clean this up. Now notice that I did put my my purple line up and down, but there's no reason why, if you wanted to do your bag with the stripe going left and right, that you couldn't, right? If you were doing it with the stripe going left and right, the difference is that you would measure instead of measuring left and right, you want to make sure that you get your height correct, right? So you want to make sure that you get this centered like this, and then you would get your height, right? Because this would be the center for your height, not your width, right? So just going to make sure, and I just double check that. And then I left my selvage on, but what I did was I accounted for my selvage when I was cutting it out, so I need to cut that selvage off. Oh, I left a lot, huh? Okay. All right. So now that's going to be either my front or my back of my piece. So if I got my math right, this will be this, right? So either the front or the back, but you can see how that's going to be in the center, right? And if I close this down, you can see it's the center. So now I need to cut another piece, but when I cut the other piece, I want it to be exactly like this for the back. So that's actually a lot easier than this one, the first part was, because you can take this piece and you can lay it on your fabric. So if I'm laying it on the reverse, so it's easier to see, but I want another piece that looks exactly like this. You see that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my pattern, and I'll start probably where I left off, which is here, right? Because that's the bottom piece that I cut off. And I'm going to start where I left off here. And if you look at it, you can see that the swirls, one goes this way and one goes the opposite way. So if you turn it upside down, right, you can see that. So I'm just going to grab this and move it up to the top. And then what I will do is I will align this with this until it meets like about the same spot. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? So I'm checking it, and that's about the same spot. If you think that that's too low, right, because I'm cutting into this piece, you can raise it up higher and cut it there. It doesn't, it won't matter, but you will need to just adjust it. And it's the smaller ones at the bottom over here, right? But when I cut it, it gets that purple piece. So you would then place it and look for places on the fabric where it's almost the same. So I think that one's may not work. Let's try this one. And it's the best guess, right? It's on the back. The back is going to be one that we just want to, and nobody's going to flip the front and the back to make sure they're the same. So that's about the same. So I'm going to just flip my fabric over to the other side. What I'm really trying to do is to get mostly, if you can see it, I'm trying to get most of this purple. So I flip it over and I can see I'm still cutting into there, but probably if I put it down here, you can see that I'm getting all of the purple, right? So now if I do, now if you want that symbol, which is very nice, you can put it down there to get the symbol. And I think what I will do is on the back, just for myself so I know which is the front, which is the back, I will get the symbol. So I'm lining everything up, trying to get it to match as well as possible. And I can use this piece to cut out the next piece. That's a nice thing about it. All right. So I'm going to get a little bit of that symbol. Right. Okay. And I'm just going to turn mine over to the front, but I just want to make sure it's right in there. It's right centered. So I will get a hint of the symbol when I cut it. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut around this because that will be my back. And then we'll talk about the flap. Okay, so what the symbol that I was referring to, I don't know if I showed it, it's this one here. So I'll get a piece of it because I want to make sure that I cut this when I stitch, I get that in my seam allowance, that line, which I will. So I'm just lining it up just like this. And I'm just going to cut. So I'm using my rotary cutter. If you want, you can draw a line. And with the line, you can, then cut it out with a scissor. Just want to make sure I get a straight edge. And just to make sure this doesn't shift, okay. And then I'm going to cut, so then I'll have two pieces. By also using that symbol, I will know which is the front from the back. Oops. Okay. I'm now going to flip this around because I want this even on the bottom. So I'm going to just flip it around just like that. And I am going to even that out on the bottom right here. So now I have the front and I have the back. I'm not worried about this because when I put my seam allowance, and my seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch, I will grab, if not all, then most of this wording on the bottom, but I'm okay with this symbol. So now I have two pieces. If you can see them, they look pretty much the same, almost the same. There's a little difference, but like I said, you're not going to notice because one's in the front and one's in the back. So now I'm going to take my front piece, and what I want to do with the front piece is I want to cut that flat piece so that when it overlaps in the front, it looks like really nice and finished. So I will go, I need my front piece. So if your two pieces are the same, that's fine. And I can see that this is spreading out that way. So I have a choice. I can make the next piece also spread out that way. Okay, so I'll show you my bag, right? Mine actually is spreading out downward. And you can make this other piece also spread out downward, or you can make it spread upward. So it's up to you how you want to do this. But what you're really trying to do is you're trying to align this centerpiece here, the purple centerpiece, with the centerpiece on the back. I'm sorry, with the centerpiece of the flap. So I'm going to look at my measurements for my flap. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to audition, see what makes the most sense for me. And the centerpiece you'd do the same thing with, right? You'd measure out this way and this way evenly. So you take the width of it and you cut it in half, and then you measure from that center mark. So if I were to put, this is a flap. If I were to put the flap, let's say here, and I'm just bringing it down about maybe 3 inches or so, just roughly, you know, because as long as it's centered, it'll be really nice. And I can look at it and I can say, well, if I put this together with my latch, am I going to like that overall effect of what I see? If it's not, then you can pick another piece of the fabric. So let's say you say, well, I don't really like that. You can fold it. There's nothing wrong. You can fold your fabric to create a different cut line, put it at the same point. Let's say that's it. And you can make this the centerpiece, right? Because now this will not only go here, it'll fold over into the back as well. But as long as it's centered, the back on the center should align as well. So you may look at that and say, I really like how that looks. And that's what I'm going to use for my centerpiece. So you would need to cut this off because there's extra fabric here. And then what you would need to do is measure to the left and the right half as much of as the total width. So example, if your flap was 4 inches wide, you'd measure 2 inches from the center line to the right and 2 inches to the left of the center line. All right. So that's how you would do it. I'm telling you, if that's what you want to do, you can do it. For the purpose of this, I'm not going to be that meticulous and fussy cut it. I'm just going to cut the width of the fabric and the height, and wherever it falls, it falls. I am going to make sure, though, it is on the center line. Since that's kind of where I started, I don't want to be random at this point, but I'm going to make sure that that's on the center line. Okay. So I'm just going to cut this. And I'm using this. My piece is actually smaller, but I'm just going to use this as a guide. And I actually cut pretty big because I just want to get it. And then I'll come back later and I'll, make it the right size. I'll cut it perfectly when I'm done. Like I said, you just want to make sure that you get that center. And I'll flip this over to the back so that you can see it when I do the final cut, the final cutting of it, so you can see it. Okay. So here's what I'm doing. I'm looking at the center line here, the center line, and I'm going to measure this way and this way. So half as much this way, half as much as that way, and then we'll get the center line. Before I do that, I just want to clean up the width of this so it's I'm getting it totally even. So I'm fixing the actual height first because I want to make sure that it's totally square before I start cutting it. All right. So now that I've turned it over, you should be able to see where I'm cutting, where I'm talking about. So what I want to do is I want to cut my piece so it's a certain amount this way according to the pattern and a certain amount that way. So I will do that. All right, so now this will be my flap. So if I take my front or my back, whatever it is, the piece that you have, when I take this, and I'll turn it over on the back so you can also see it a lot easier. It doesn't matter if you want this to go up when you're attaching it or this to go this way when you're attaching it. Just make sure you attach the back piece in the same direction, okay? So let's say I wanted it to flow up. When I put my flap on, that will flow down. And yes, the flap is smaller. It's shorter than, but now you can see there's almost like a continuous flow. So because of the continuous flow, it looks like it's, and it's not perfectly fussy cut, because if it was perfectly fussy cut, I'd need to account for seam allowance and all that stuff. What I'm just trying to do is give the visual illusion that this is one continuous piece. And because it's getting attached to the back, when we do the back piece, and I'll just take the back and show you that. When we take the back piece and we attach it, that center line will also be one continuous flow. So it's just centered around that particular line. Okay, so that runs straight through. All right, so that's the front, the back, and the flap. So the next pieces that we're going to cut, I'm just setting these aside. The next piece that we're going to cut is going to be for our gusset on the side. Now these we can definitely fold in half. Once again, if you want them to be exactly the same, then you would cut them exactly the same, right? So if you want these gusset pieces to be exactly the same, you would cut them to be exactly the same. I'm not going to worry about it, so I'm just going to cut two pieces at one time. But I think you have the idea of how to make them look exactly the same. So the gusset is attached in such a way that you have a piece that gets attached to this side, and then you have a piece that gets attached to that side. What we will also do is when we cut the waterproof canvas is we will cut that middle piece that gets attached. Okay. So now let's cut the gusset pieces. And I'm just going to cut them at the same time. So I'm just going to fold this in half. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you want to cut them, if you want to cut them going this way or this way. I just cut everything in the same direction, but it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to cut them off of the bottom here because I have a little piece. Fold it in half. Hopefully it will be exactly the width that I need. like I said, I'm not worrying too much about whether or not they match on the side of the bag. If it matters to you, you can absolutely do it so it matches exactly. Each side matches. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to cut this. I'm just going to cut the pieces. And that's right. Hold on. I must cut it wrong. And I'm just trying to get it straight. It is bigger than what I need, but that's okay. Just want to make sure that I get enough. So I'm going to clean this up. I'm just cutting it, rough cutting it to what I need. And then I will come back and cut it. I'm going to cut each piece individually, just to make sure that I get them the same. And sorry. All right. And then I'm going to just make sure that they're the right width. So I did cut it a little bit bigger, but that was intentional. All right. So now we have our two gusset pieces. Notice mine don't look the same. I'm not worrying about it, but they don't have to look the same. I'm going to put that center strip down the middle. And because they're on the side of the bag, you won't notice it. It does, or it should go, when we're done, it's going to go from here around to the bottom piece here. And then we're going to put this black piece. And there's one for the other side as well. So that's what the gusset pieces were. Once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If you need me to repeat anything, please feel free to ask. Okay. So we have the gusset, we have the straps, we have the front, the back, and the flap. The next thing that we need to do is we need to cut that internal slip pocket. And we need to cut, so that's these pockets in here. So that will be this pocket here, and that will be the lining pocket here. So we're going to cut this pocket and that pocket. And then we will have all of the external pieces cut. So To cut that, to cut the slip pocket in the directions, there are actually two pieces. Please make sure that you're cutting the slip pocket, and it's what I'm referring to as the slip pocket exterior on the pattern, because the other piece is cut with waterproof canvas. So the slip pocket exterior, I'm going to cut because I want to keep as much of the fabric as possible. Like I said, in the pattern, I lay it out in such a way that I did not fussy cut. I just give you straight cuts. So, you know, it should look, it won't look, I guess, symmetrical, but it's not meant to look symmetrical. So I'm just going to cut this to cut that pocket, that slip pocket. So I'm actually going to just cut it here, only because it's an even cut with my other piece. And then I still have this almost like a quarter of a yard of fabric. And then I'll cut this slip pocket. So the slip pocket, if you want to, you can make this go in the same direction. Or if you want to, on the inside, you can make it go left and right. Nobody's going to see it on the inside. It's up to you what you want to do. Usually, if you're using fabric and you don't have a lot of it, you know, it can be a different direction. So I just want to clean this edge up here. And we're going to clean that up. All right. So now the slip pocket exterior. I'm not going to worry about it. I can go on the center line. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to cut it. Hopefully I have enough. Yeah, I should. I'm just going to cut it to do it right. I'm just going to cut it randomly. So it may look like it's not random, but it is. Because I'm just taking this clean edge and cutting to that clean edge. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it this big. Okay. And this piece is the slip pocket that goes on the inside of the bag. I'm going to set that to the side. Next, we need it'll say zipper pocket A and zipper pocket B. You can cut them the same size and then trim them down later. So I just want you to know that if you don't want to cut them separately, you can cut them to the largest dimension. Just cut 2, and then we can trim it down later when we're done. I'm going to cut it to the dimensions because for the sew along, I don't want to confuse anybody. So I'm just going to cut it that way. So let me see what I've got here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try and see what I have as far as measurements, if I can use this to make the pocket. That's what I'm actually measuring. Okay. Yeah. I don't really have enough to make the pocket. So with this piece. So I'm just going to put this to the side, and I'm going to pull out this other piece of fabric. And I am going to cut 2 pieces the same size and then just trim one down. So I'm just going to cut 2 the same size and then cut it down. You can also, if you want to worry about this stripe, you can. If you don't, it doesn't matter. If all you have is fabric and it's going, you know, this way for the lining of the pocket, nobody's going to see it. Totally fine. You can do that. Just trying to see. And I'm just cutting two of the same pieces. And then, like I said, I'm going to trim one down. Um, uh, and because I have two of the same pieces here, I'm just going to make sure. Um, I'm just going to cut them like this. So I have one, and then this one's just a tad shorter. So I'm just going to cut this one just a tad shorter. Like I said, you can leave it and then cut it at the end. You don't have to do them separately. I just gave you two different pieces. And then we're going to need to do a facing. So these are the pocket pieces, and I'm just going to clip those together. What the facing does on a pocket, if you go right up a pocket facing, pattern with the pocket facing, I'll show you what it does. It's not for the outside of the pocket, it's for the inside of the pocket. So what the pocket facing does is, if you've ever looked into bags, and you can go to like Target or Walmart or any of those, look into like even makeup pouches. When you look at the inside of the bag here, so on the inside of the bag, you won't see the raw edge of the zipper. So we put what's called a pocket facing in there. And when we fold it in, it creates this finished edge on the zipper. Sometimes if you look in a bag and you look inside, you can actually see the raw edge of the zipper on the inside. And what the facing does is it allows you to create your pocket in such a way, it's probably easier to see, where you don't see the raw edge of the zipper. So that's the purpose of a pocket facing. And so it is a little extra step. However, that extra step makes your bag look that much more finished. So we're going to need one of those as well. So it's called, it's actually called in the directions, it's called the zipper facing. And so we're going to cut one of those. Okay. So this is going to be my zipper facing, and I'm going to put that together with my pocket because they all go together. All right. So just double checking that we have everything that we need for the exterior fabric that we need to cut. So this is for the pocket. It's two pieces, so it should be a total of three pieces. Two for the pocket lining, two for the pocket lining, and the zipper facing. The next thing that we're going to need is a piece for our interior slip pocket. So that's going to be that on our directions is called slip pocket exterior. For some reason I'm looking at this, it doesn't look right. Okay, so this is the slip pocket exterior. We're also going to need we're also going to need two pieces for the side. So these are the two pieces that we're going to put for our gusset. So those are our gusset pieces. We're going to need our strap. and it's a short and long strap, so it's called main strap and slider strap. So we need that. We're going to need our flap piece, and we're going to need front and back, which is another 2 pieces that we have. So all of those pieces should be the pieces that we need, that we cut out of our exterior. So we're going to take these right now and we're going to put those to the side. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the foam. So the bag itself uses foam to stabilize it. So it's pretty squishy, but it uses foam to stabilize it on all of the exterior pieces. And the way that we attach the foam is I'm using Annie Soft and Stable, which is it's not a fusible foam, it's a sewing foam. And to keep the foam out of the seam allowance, so I'm just going to turn this right side out. To keep the foam out of the seam allowance, I actually cut it 1/4 of an inch smaller than all of the other exterior pieces that I cut. The only place that it's not cut 1/4 of an inch smaller is this bottom piece here, is this little piece that's on our side gusset. I actually cut it the same width as that side gusset piece. And that's because here I actually sew it in. So I attach it to the side gusset, whereas here I fuse it using the interfacing that we're going to cut. Okay. So let's cut the foam. So I'm going to cut that, and this is actually pretty easy to cut. I can cut multiple pieces of this, which is what I will do. So I will cut the front and the back together, and I will cut the sides together. So let's cut the first thing we're going to cut together is, let's do the flat piece. So just make sure I have all the pieces. Yep, the flat piece. And just want to make sure. Yep. And I'm just going to square this up a little bit. And let me show you what I did when I was talking about it being slightly smaller. So this is the flap. This is the foam. When I lay the foam on here, you should be able to see that there's approximately 1/4 of an inch going all the way around the side. So it's slightly smaller than the actual flat piece. And that 1/4 of an inch, because this is a sewing interfacing, I need to be able to lock this down. So when I put my woven interface over it, I'm going to spend extra attention at the end to seal this in. So that's why it's a little bit smaller. So that's my flap. Okay. The next piece is the pocket. The pocket, internal slip pocket. The internal slip pocket does not have any foam, so I won't need to do that. I will need to do my front and my back, and I will cut those together. So I'm just taking 2 pieces of foam. If you have foam, you can fold it in half. And I'm going to do these together. I'm going to cut them together. Just I don't have to cut them individually. And I also save all my foam because if you need to put two pieces of foam together, you can put them together like this and then just zigzag stitch down, and you can use the foam, the extra foam. So I usually don't, if it's, you know, bigger than a certain, like this one's going to be a sliver, I just throw that away. But if it's a sizable piece, I keep it. Um, okay. So we're doing the front and back. And that's going to be trying to figure out which side is easier to cut. Um, I think it's this side. I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me to cut from the right, you know, from this side than it is from the other side. So. Okay. Perfect. And these little scrap pieces you can always keep, because if you make, you know, a type of key fob, or you can use this to interface it. It's about an inch wide, these pieces. So you can normally keep them if you want to. If you don't care, you can throw them away. Hey, Whitney. Yes, I would. Yes, I do. So Whitney asked, actually said, would you ever quilt with the soft and stable? And if so, would you cut the piece? Would you cut the larger piece first? Would you cut the piece larger first? I always cut the piece larger. So, um, what her question is if I were to take, let's say, this piece of material, and this is my exterior, and this is the exterior. Her question is if I'm ever going to quilt this. So quilting means that you attach foam, sometimes it's fleece, to the back, and you would either do like squiggly lines. Some people do decorative curvy lines. Some people just do, you know, cross hatches this way and this way. I actually don't have a bag here that I've done to show you, but that's quilting it. And what happens is the places where the stitches meet. So if I were to do a diamond shape here, this piece here would puff out a little bit, as well as this piece. So the pieces on either side of the stitches actually pop up. And so her question is, if I was ever quilting, would I cut them larger? I always cut them larger. Everybody does it different. I normally cut it larger by at least an inch all the way around. And that's because of the way that I quilt my pieces. I know that an inch is a good amount. So if I cut it by an inch, what quilting does, depending on how much you quilt something, it draws the fabric in. So if you know you're going to do a lot of quilting, you may want to go even 2 inches or 3 inches. So if you're going to do a lot of decorative smaller stitches, smaller quilting, then you may want to go as big as 2 inches or 3 inches. I normally cut at 1 inch all the way around, which works out for me, because when I do my quilting, I normally do it at about 1 inch apart. So on smaller pieces, it's like 1 inch apart. So it's something that you definitely want to be aware of if you're ever quilting. So don't cut it to the exact measurements. Always cut this bigger, and the quilting, or the quilting material, right? Because it could be interfacing, like the foam. Some people do it with batting. Whatever you're using, make sure they're both cut bigger than whatever your final project is that you want to do. So thank you for that question, Whitney. And hi. Yeah. It's interesting you said you're glad that I'm on YouTube. I would always call it the YouTube, and my daughter would always correct me. She said, "Mommy, it's not the YouTube. It's on YouTube." I'm like, "Okay." But I think I'm in the YouTube. I don't know why. All right, so these pieces are the front and back. And then the gusset pieces on the side, we're also going to need foam for. We will not need foam um, for the strap. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned this. For the strap pieces, these strap pieces, we're also going to need foam. I don't have to cut them because I put them in the kit. So I'm using the foam kit, and they've already been cut. But you should cut the foam to the directions of this. I will come back and trim these down later because they will need to be trimmed, but I won't do it right this second. I'll come back later. So my foam pieces are already cut. This piece here was for the pocket. We're not going to put foam on the pocket pieces right now. So, I mean, at all. So we won't do that for those pieces either. And then the last pieces that we have to cut, or we have to cut foam for, are these side gusset pieces. And what's nice is I think this piece will actually fit that piece. So I still saving a little bit. So I will cut these, and they're going to be, remember I said they should be smaller because we're going to fuse them on, and then we'll talk about the interfacing in a moment. All right, so matter of fact, let me do this so I don't drive myself crazy. Since I have to cut two of them anyway, I'll just cut two of them at one time. So this was the gusset pieces. And these are going to be I do use this is a 60, and I use a smaller one normally of these rotary cutters for my fabric, in case anybody wants to know. So because the foam is thicker, I use a bigger blade. Once again, I use a rotary cutter. You can definitely draw the pieces out and then cut them. You don't have to use a rotary cutter. So if you don't have a rotary cutter, you don't need to run out and buy a rotary cutter. You can just draw out the pieces and do it that way. So just want to make sure I cut these right because I was doing some math in my head, and that's never a good thing. Okay. Yep. Okay. So these are for the gusset pieces. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the interfacing. Now the interfacing is, you can do it different ways. I'm going to cut the pieces according to the direction, but what I will also show you is how to cut the pieces in such a way that you can do what's known as block fusing, and I'll do that on the pieces that I don't use foam for. All right. Now, before I do that, I will take my foam pieces, right? So my foam pieces are going to be my flap, not the side gussets. It's going to be my flap, my front, my back, and my flap. And if you look at these pieces, what you will notice is that they all have this curve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that curve before I put the interfacing on. And that way there'll be equally as much space away from the curve as they are, you know, as they are from the fabric. So because they're short, I want to also cut the foam, the curve. So what I'm going to do is I'll do that before before I fuse the interfacing on. So let me cut the interfacing. Now the interfacing should be exactly the same measurements as your front and your back and as your flap. So it's not shorter. And I'm using a woven interface. So it has movement like cotton. It moves and it has stretch and has movement. And that's what I'm using because I do want it to have some movement. Now, because I'm using, I'm not worrying about matching anything. And I know that I need two of my pieces for my front and my back. I'm just going to cut the two pieces for my front and my back at one time. So I'm actually folding it in fours. So there's 4 pieces here. I'm trying to fold it in 4, but I think I have to just fold it in 2. Yeah. Okay. So I'm folding it in half. This comes in different widths. This one I think is 44 wide or something, or 42 wide, but you just want to match up those edges. And because I know that my flap is equally as wide as my front and back, it's actually a little bit shorter. I know that I can cut, you know, 4 pieces, and I'm going to use 3 of those pieces. So I'm just going to fold this one more time. And then, because I want to make sure that I actually get to the ends, I'm going to make sure to sort of square this up. So I'm going to trim a little bit off the edge over here, because I want to make sure that when I get to the end of my material, it's not too short, because I need it to be able to fuse down the foam. So I want to make sure I square this up. Normally I wouldn't worry as much about it, but because I'm using it to fuse down the edges, I want to make sure. All right. All right, so now we're going to cut front and back. And remember, I'm cutting 4 pieces here, so then I'm just going to trim them down. Oops. Let's cut that too short. All right, and then I'm just going to, I don't worry about this little selvage piece. I do try to account for the fact that it's on there. I don't cut it off initially, but I do, especially in this case, I am going to cut it off because I don't want, like I said, I want to make sure that I have enough to fuse that foam down. And if it doesn't meet the edge, it won't fuse it in. So I am going to cut it off. Normally I wouldn't. I would just, you know, use it that way. But I'm just going to cut this off. And then I'm going to measure across. And if I did it right, I can show you what the plan is for these pieces. So if I take this particular piece, which is either my front or my back, what we will be doing when we start fusing is we will be aligning the foam in such a way that we leave about 1/4 of an inch all the way around the piece. So by leaving the 1/4 of an inch all the way around the piece, when I take my interfacing, which will be glue side down, and the glue side is the bumpy side, there's a bumpy side, or any smooth side, the side that has the adhesive, because there's another interfacing that has a smooth side. So it's usually the shiny or bumpy side. The reason it's called woven is because if you look at it, it has a stretch. So I'm pulling at the corners and it's woven like a woven fabric, right? If it doesn't have any stretch, like there's some that if you do this or you pull at the corner, it doesn't have any stretch, that's considered non-woven interfacing. And so that is a lot stiffer. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this when we're ready to attach it. We're going to lay it on top of our foam. And you can see I cut it exactly the same size. And when I cut it the same size, what's going to happen is these 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to make sure when I push my interfacing out towards the edge, because I want to try to stretch it in that direction, and I'll do that with the iron, it will fuse this 1/4 of an inch all the way around, which seals in my foam, because my foam, like I mentioned, is not it is not a fusible foam, and it gives a lot smoother finish. So this is my woven interface. We're going to talk about cutting those corners in 1 second. I just want to do the interfacing for the flap, and then we'll talk about cutting the corners. All right. So I think this is. I just got to trim a little bit off here. Now, in all of the previous bags that we've made, there have been no curved edges. So what I did this time, I think, is I threw everybody a curveball because I added curved edges, and that was for the flap and the body. So now all of these pieces, so the lining, I'm sorry, the flap, interfacing foam, and exterior piece, as well as the same for the front and back, we're going to need to cut curves. We're also going to come back later on, and when we cut the lining pieces, because we haven't cut those yet out of waterproof canvas, we will also go in and put the curves in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look for my curved pieces, and we're going to cut them. So in the directions, I give you easy way to know how to line them up, because it's supposed to be beginner friendly, and hopefully I made it that way this time. I'm just going to take one of my pieces. So I'm going to right now take my foam piece, one of my foam pieces. You will get 2 pieces of that you need to cut out. It's in the back of the pattern. And you will get these 2 pieces, right? So one will be left and one will be right, and they fit on the corners, just like that. So that you get a visual of how it works. And this piece, I think this piece is a flap. Well, it doesn't matter. What I have you do, and I'm going to do it here, is I have you draw a box on the right and left corner. And then what I have you do is I have you take right corner and put it right there in the box. And then all you simply do is draw around this curve, just like so, to make the curve. So what you're doing is you're aligning this edge and this edge with the line that you drew. And I give you the dimensions on how to do that. You then create that curved edge. You do the same thing on the left-hand side. So you take your ruler, you draw yourself a little box, just like that. I'm doing it roughly. You take your piece and you lay it on here. Make sure you align this with your box and the edges here, top and bottom. And then what you're going to do is holding that pattern piece down, you're going to draw a curved line. Now it doesn't go, because you're aligning the edge here, it's not going to go all the way to the outside. It only goes as far as you can draw it because it's just meant to be a curve. So if you align it top and bottom, you'll get that curve. So I just want to see for myself. Okay. So now what'll happen is you'll have two curved edges. This, by the way, is a friction pen. If I apply heat, it disappears. I advise you to use a marking tool that you know you can erase or you can remove. This erases with heat. Try not to use a permanent. I've done that where I've used, and I think hairspray should get it out, but really don't want the headache of that. So try to use something that's removable. So then what you're going to do is you're going to cut this curve out on both the right and the left. You just cut it out just like that. Okay. I just want to see which piece this is because I don't want to make sure I get all the pieces right. The last thing I want to do is cut the pieces wrong and then, okay. So this is one piece. Okay, that piece goes with this. So this is my back pieces and my back interface. So now what you're doing is you're only cutting the bottom curve. So you're not cutting, so on the front piece here, you're only cutting the bottom, and the same for the back. And on the flap, you're only cutting on one side, either the front, the top, or the bottom, but it's still only the bottom of each of those pieces. The top, you're not cutting. So this is going to remain straight. The next thing I want you to do is on your pieces for your foam, and we'll wait till we attach it, but what you can see it through. What I want you to do is you will take, and we'll do it. You're going to fold this piece in half just like this, and we'll do it later on. But I'll explain it to you now so you understand. And in the pattern, there is a fold line. You would fold it in half, just like that. Right? And you're going to line up the curve. So you're going to line up the straight edge and the curve. So line up the curve. And then what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line right here. And it can be the length of the foam or part of the way, right? So you're going to do that on both sides along that fold line. So then it'll look like that on both sides. The reason we do this is because when we add the gusset, it's a good place to know where we should be to line it up so that it's centered. I'm going to mark the centers of all my pieces anyway, but that's why I have you do that, so that when you're going around the curve, you say, oh, this piece has to match exactly here, and this piece has to match here, and then I know that I'm centered. All right, so now that I've done it to one piece, I'm not going to do it to the interface quite yet, but I will do it to the other pieces. So that's one piece. I'm going to do the same on the next piece of foam. So I'm going to, you can draw the box. I'm just going to lay it here and draw the line. Like I said, I wrote it in the pattern a certain way just to make it easier for somebody who's a beginner, so that they would know and make sure that they're lining up and they can understand kind of what I'm doing here. So I drew one curve here. And this is the same. So the left corner here, let's do it here. The left corner is the same as the right. It's just like your shoes. They're mirrored, right? So if I flip this over like this, it then becomes the right-hand side. But like I said, just to make it easier for people who have not done this before, I made two separate pieces, but they're really just mirror images of each other. So now I'm going to cut this curve out. Okay. If you want to, you can align these together. If you want to, make sure they're even, and you can come back in and trim them even. But if you do the curve, it should be fine. So I have both of those. I'm just going to transfer that fold mark. Now the fold mark You can do it on all the pieces, but you don't really need to do it on the flap because there is no curve. Okay. So that's going to be the fold mark. I'm just showing you how it's done. We're going to have to redo it because once I apply heat to this, all of these lines are going to go away. So I just wanted to show you what it is, but I'm going to repeat it again so that you'll know. Okay. And then this piece here is for our flat piece. So this piece is for the flat piece, and we want to do the same thing with the curved lines or the curved corners. And remember, I'm saying it's only on the bottoms. You're leaving the top totally straight. All right, so you're only going to do it on the bottom. And then once we've done it here, we're going to transfer this as well to our exterior fabric pieces. And when we do our lining pieces, we're going to do the same thing on the lining pieces. So I'm just cutting this. I'm cutting this. Okay, so now we have two curved edges. Put that to the side. Once again, I don't have to mark that for the lining. And then we want to make those same marks on our lining piece. Take your pieces and just look at them. This is going to be the exterior piece, and this is going to be the flap. So just make sure when you're laying your flap on that you have, when you make the curve, make sure it's on the place where you want, which side you want it to be on, right? So if you like your flap better this way, then do your curves here. If you like it better this way, then do your curves here. So take a look at the flap. If you lined it up like if you cut it randomly, it doesn't matter, but take a look at the flap. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same curved edges on my fabric here. And to speed things up, I'm just going to cut it with a rotary cutter. And yes, I do cut these one at a time. I don't take any shortcuts except for maybe using my rotary cutter. If you use a rotary cutter, you can also take little cuts. So I can cut one cut this way, move that out of the way, one cut this way. And that's an easier way to cut around curves. So I'm just following the curve line. I don't know if you can see that. And I take the last cut line here. And I cut it. All right. So I just want to see my flap. Just watch your fingers if you're using a rotary cutter. I do have a smaller one, so I can always use a smaller one, which gets better around the curves. Some people use an X-Acto knife or something like that, some type of cutting tool like that when there's small curves. But there's so many different ways you can cut these curves. If you draw the lines, you know, and you prefer to just do it straight out with a scissor because you may not have a rotary cutter right now, you can. Okay. And like I said, you would cut your interfacing. I'm not going to cut mine. I'm going to show you another way, because what's the point of doing a live if I don't soon show you something a little bit different than you would find in the pattern. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the interfacing on, and then I'm going to cut the curve. And that's just to make sure I've sealed everything in, and because the curves can be tricky, but once again, if you cut it, you'll get it. Okay. So we're going to put that to the side right now with our interfacing. I'm going to get my ironing board, and we're going to iron, and then we'll come back and we'll cut the lining. Now the lining pieces, the waterproof canvas pieces, because they don't require any kind of interfacing. I'm going to do those last because they don't require anything. Hopefully everybody's with me. Haven't lost anybody on the turn. I don't know if it's getting darker here. It's getting more nighttime here. Um, it's actually 7:30. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start out and I'll just take one of my pieces. So I'll take, this is my back. I know that because it has that. It doesn't really matter. Just going to heat up my iron a little bit. And I do use steam. And I'm going to iron these pieces before I attach what I need to attach. So I just try to get out any wrinkles that may be on the front. I get them out. So if I fog up the camera, I'm not doing anything underneath. I'm just ironing it. Hey, Arnetta, how are you? I'm so glad that you and Whitney are watching me on YouTube because it helps me know what's happening in that space. I do have it on my phone, YouTube showing on my phone so I can see, but I turned on the sound so I don't get feedback. So yesterday there was an issue with feedback, and the reason that I had the feedback after numerous hours is that I use my laptop for work, and we're all using Zoom and things like that. And my when I log in, it says, "Do you want to allow?" That whole, "Do you want to allow this application to have access to your video and your sound, your mic?" And normally I click no. Yesterday, for some reason, I clicked yes. And when I clicked yes, what ended up happening was it turned on my computer mic, which is what gave me the feedback. I never turn on my mic on my computer, ever. And so I had to troubleshoot and figure out where it was coming from, because even after everything was turned off, I kept hearing feedback. Nothing was running. Nothing, the stream wasn't running or anything. But it gave, not only did it give me feedback, it was a screeching sound. And I won't, I was going to play it for you guys, but I thought that would be rude. So that's what it was. And it was actually in Chrome. So I'm going to take the fabric. And like I said, I iron out as many wrinkles as I can. What I will say to you also, I was wondering why isn't this getting hot? What I will say to you also is if you're using interfacing, like the woven interfacing or any type of interfacing, it's also good to warm up your fabric. So I usually use it to warm up the fabric on the wrong side. And then that way, when I stick down the interface, because it's still warm or hot, the interfacing sticks. So it helps to make it stick. So hopefully, yeah, it's getting hot now. So I didn't. Oh, you're thinking about going to So Magical? Well, if you do, come visit me. I like to see friendly. I don't really know. I think I know designers. So I know Lauren. I know a couple of people there, but I know them because, like, Lauren, I actually know because I met her in person, but everybody else, I just know of them. I don't know them personally because I've never met them. So I'm going to be all geeked out, but, but it's be great to see familiar faces, like, and also to meet people like you guys that we just talk during our, over our Zoom calls or whatever. But this will give us an opportunity to meet. So hopefully I haven't lost anything. I heard something go bump in the night. And I just want to make sure that So I'm going to put down the foam. And remember I said, because I drew these pieces here, I drew them with the Frisian marker. So that's going to go away. This blue is going to go away. So I'll show you. See, it goes away. So it disappears. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I make sure that this is centered all the way around. You can take your ruler and measure it, and it should be, if you did it correctly, it should be 1/4 of an inch all the way around. The other thing you can do is if you take your pieces, like let's say I take my foam, I fold it in half. I was going to do this afterwards, but I fold it in half. Where that peak is right here, hopefully you can see it. Got a little bit of shadowing here. I'm going to just snip it about 1/8 of an inch. And when you do that, it makes a snip. I fold it in half again, realign it to the bottom, and I do another snip, just like that. And then because you need to match the sides as well, you can fold it in half widthwise and put another snip. And I normally do this at the end, but we'll do it now because it's a good way to show you also. And then you're going to do the same thing with the fabric. So you'd fold the fabric in half widthwise, 1/8 of an inch. And the reason 1/8 of an inch is because you don't want to make a hole that you can't sew over. So you just need a little tiny snip that you can see on the other side. Always readjust your bottom. So don't assume that it's, you know, if you flip it over, it's exactly the same. I always spend the time to readjust it. Put another snip. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little snip in there. And then I'm going to fold it this way and add another snip. So this is what I use. This is what I do, especially when I sew. Now, because I snipped the top and the bottom, I can align those 2 snip marks. And then I know that I'm center on the side here as well. Okay. So then what happens is if you lay your fabric out, you have a center marking here. And for us, it should be about the center of this. And you have 2 center markings on this side. When you lay your foam down, you're just really matching up the centers. So if I match this center, the bottom center, the left, and the right, I'm exactly 1/4 of an inch all the way around, right? Because I can't be off. I can't be up here and lined up over here. If I line it up, all the snip marks, I'm going to be 1/4 of an inch all the way around. It's a quick way to check. Okay. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your interface for that piece. So this is my interface. I didn't cut the corners because I want to make sure I get all the interfacing adhered as perfectly as possible. And I'll come back and do it. It should cover your piece. And then we're not going to like push down, like just come here and push down. I'm actually going to push the fabric out towards the edge. So I'm holding it with one hand. I'm taking my iron and I'm going to push my hot iron out to the edge. By doing that, I'm making sure that I get that edge piece covered. I'm going to do the same thing with the top. You're going to push, but you should get most of it out to the end. You can see there's a little bit, but I'm getting most of it. And then I'm going to do the same with the bottom, and then I'm going to come back and finalize it, right? So my iron's nice and hot now. And I will turn off the steam. Okay. And I will push all the way out to the edge. So by doing that, I now know that I have it sealed. I'll show you why I didn't cut the corners in a second for the interface. I'm going to come back and cut them. But now because I pushed from the center out to the edge, I know that it's sealing in the edge. So now what I can do is I can go back along that edge, all the edges, with the point of the hot iron and seal them in. So you can see that I'm sealing them in. If you try to just seal it, it's going to be just shy. And then when you get to the other side, you won't have enough. So that's the way I do it. So I push out towards the ends, and then I come back later on and I apply the iron. Okay. And like I said, I do use steam. I turned it off. once I had it started. I did turn it off. All right. So now when I look at the front, I have these corners. I'm just going to go back and cut them, but I didn't want to cut them until I sealed everything. And because I use this to seal. So now just double check that that's all sealed in. Make sure you seal the middle, you fuse the middle part to the foam as well. So apply some heat there and it should be totally sealed in. All right. So if it's a sew-in interfacing and you have to put woven interface on top of it, it's okay to cut it shorter. Cut it about 1/4 of an inch shorter all the way around. And then once you've cut it, use the woven interface to seal in the edges. So you don't have to use a fusible interface. Some people think you have to use, oh, I have to use fusible interface. No, you can use the sew-in interface, cut it shorter. The good thing is it keeps it out of the seams, right? So it's not in the seam, so it keeps the bulk out, especially if you have a domestic machine. And the other thing is you can seal it in using your woven interface. Hi, Mona. You are more than welcome. And thank you for joining me on YouTube. I am so glad that there's 3 of you on here, and I'm so glad for that. Because it just I'm trying to give you guys as much content as possible. Because I know that not everybody, and Susan in the group is the one who mentioned that she doesn't really use it. And I think Arnetta said it also. She doesn't really use Facebook as much. So I'm glad that you're on here because you can let me know if I'm getting reverb, because some of my videos there was that the echoing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this around the edges just like this. And this is just the interface because the other piece is done. You can use can come back with your rotary cutter if you want and cut it. All right. And that is my back done. Remember I said that there is that curve. So we want to make sure that we take our pattern piece, we lay it down, and we do mark that curve. So I'm going to go back in because remember I said it would disappear, but I wanted to show you. We are going to remark these curved edges over here because that's when I get to that. I'll know when I'm laying my gusset piece, the pieces that I should match up where I am. So I'm going to do the same with the other side. And I'm just making sure that I have the center. Okay. All right, so I marked the curves. If you want to, and I'm going to do it because I can't see my center mark again because I sealed it up in there, I'm just going to remark, and I just need the top and the bottom. You don't need all the side pieces like you did before. You just need the top and bottom. So I'm just going to mark the top and bottom, and that just makes it easier also when I'm putting that gusset in. It also makes it easier if you mark the top and bottom. You can use, by the way, you can measure it and use a pen or marking tool. It makes it easier also when you're putting in the lining to know that you have your lining centered in your bag. There's nothing worse than sticking your lining in and it goes a little bit askew. So that's how we do it. I'm going to do this again with the flap just to show you one more time. So I need the flap piece. And remember I said the flap, the front and the back are the only ones that have the curve. And you're only doing the curve on the bottom. You're not doing the curve on the top as well. And believe it or not, when we sew these pieces on together, your gusset is not curved; it's straight. But you'll see how we fit it in, and it fits nicely. All right. So I'm going to take my flat piece. I'm going to iron this. Thank you so much, Whitney. Yeah, that audio. Well, the weekend will be the test because the weekend is when I'll be switching cameras. So you'll see me sewing. You'll see me back on the camera. But I'm trying to stick with one camera tonight. I have actually all 3 set up, but we'll see what happens a little bit later as I switch out. So now I'm going to line these up. Once again, you mark the top and the sides of all your pieces, and then you'll know what the center is. I'm just eyeballing it here, but you should mark the centers. You're then going to, so it's your fabric. Your fabric, by the way, is wrong side up, right? Because we're attaching this to the back side. The foam, there is no right or wrong side. There probably is, but it doesn't matter. So you just lay that on top. And then the interfacing, it's the bumpy side against the back of your main piece, right? So this side should have no adhesive on it. If this has adhesive on it, when you put the iron down, you're going to get adhesive stuck to your iron. So now I'm going to lay this on, and I'm going to make sure that it covers all my edges, or goes to the edges. And remember I said when we iron, we're going to push out. And that's one thing good about the fact this is woven. It will have give and movement. If I used an interfacing that had no give and movement, this you'd probably cut it bigger and then just trim it down. So now I'm going to start. I start in the middle and I push out to the edge. So I'm right-sided, so right-handed, so I normally push to the right side first. Then you can push to the left side. Remember, push out to the edge. And I let my iron actually drop down exactly where that that interfacing is not, I mean, that foam is not, just to make sure I get the edges. And then I'm going to do the top. And turn on a little bit of steam. And I'm going to go around and around. So I'm just going to make sure that I fuse all of this in. And I'm just going around the edges. For those of you who've not joined me before, I actually put a Teflon sheet down. So like in the case here where I have this side is glue, it's sticky. I'm not worried about it sticking to my ironing board because there is a Teflon sheet down there. And even if it does, if you take like an old credit card or a gift card, you can always just use the edge of it and just scrape it like this and the glue will come off. But I tend to cover everything in a Teflon sheet. The only bad thing is it's not breathable like your fabric would be. So if you have an ironing board, your fabric actually will radiate heat back up. Okay. So now that one's done, that's a flap. I'm just going to cut these corners, and that's just the interfacing that was on there. So I'm going to cut that off. Just like that. And then I'm going to make sure that I mark my centers here. So in the directions, it tells you which pieces have foam. I gave you a list, and then you should be able to check them off as you complete them, which is also a recommendation that I received, to make a list with check boxes so that you know what you cut and what you've already done. All right. So I did the flap. I did the back. The back of it's going to come like this. So you can see that purple lines up right in the middle. Like I said, if you didn't do this, that's totally fine. I was just showing because somebody had asked. I'm going to not do all of the foam pieces, but now that you understand how it's done, I'm going to leave you to do it. So tomorrow night when we come back, all of your foam pieces should be done. So your front, your back, your your side gusset pieces also have foam. So make sure you put the foam on the side gusset pieces, which were these two pieces. And then I will show you how to, in a few minutes, when we finish cutting out the lining pieces, I will show you how to attach the bottom gusset piece to the bottom of the bag. And not the bottom gusset piece, the foam for this foam. There's foam in here. I'll show you how to attach that. That's actually sewn in. So, and there's a reason why we don't, because it's waterproof canvas, we don't iron on waterproof canvas. So these pieces I'm going to leave you to complete for tomorrow. The next thing we're going to talk about is interfacing. And I said I would show you how to interface for specific pieces, because I don't necessarily, I gave you the cut list on how to cut these out. the pieces. Like this one happens to be the slip pocket. We have the pocket with the facing. So these pieces also get interfaced, and in the directions I tell you it's actually the same measurement as the piece, and they get interfaced, but I don't interface them. I don't cut the interfacing out. I actually do what's known as block fusing. So I'll show you how to do that. So this is going to be my slip pocket, the center of my slip pocket. And hopefully you can see me. There's a bad shadow, and I just don't know if it's on my side, it's on your side, but there's a very bad shadow happening on this side. So let me see if that's better for you. Okay. So what I do is I wrong side up, I put the fabric wrong side up, and I take my interfacing, which is right side up, and that's the side without the glue. I lay it on top of the piece that I want to fuse. So I don't want to have any glue exposed to my iron. So I lay it on top, wrong sides together. And then what I do, and this is longer, so this is why it's block fusing. This is actually longer than the piece that I need. So I don't cut it, I cut it afterwards. And what I will do is I will fuse this onto my fabric. When I am done, I will then cut it out. And because I'm doing it this way, I can do this block fusing for several pieces and then just cut out those several pieces. So I'll show you. And maybe one of the videos, I'll also show you when you're cutting pieces. The other thing you can do is you can cut the interface at the same time that you are cutting your, fabric. So if you want to do all at the same time, you can. Just want to get you some light on the subject over here. The sun's going down on my neck of the woods. Okay. So I think there's a couple of you that are close to me. Mona, I think you're close. I'm in New York, so I know Mona's close. Arnett is close. You're all on the East Coast for me. I'm not sure who else is over here on the East Coast. Okay. All right. So I fuse this. So the next thing that I want to interface, and I interface my pocket. You don't have to. There are some patterns that this is the pocket zipper facing. Some patterns interface the pocket. Some patterns don't. I interface it for durability reasons, because if I'm always putting my hand in and out of that pocket, it's a lot harder to wear a hole in two pieces of fabric than it is in one. So I put it in, I interface it, but I've seen patterns where they don't. So what I'm going to do with the block fusing is I'm going to lay the other piece of material, and I'm going to leave a space because remember I have to cut. I don't want them on top of each other like this. So I'm going to leave a space. What I did is I warmed up. Remember I talked about warming up your fabric. So when you warm up your fabric and then lay it on top of the glue and press with your hand, it tends to stick. So then what you can do is you can just flip this over like this. You should still have your space between, and you can probably see it. There's a space between here and here. And just double check. I put my facing in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to iron that. So this you do give steam. I tend to move mine around. You're supposed to leave it. This is SoFuse, whether it's SoFuse SF101. You're supposed to just put it on there, leave it for a couple of seconds, and then shift it around. And I guess that's not to stretch it, but I tend to do it like I'm ironing something. So, but now you can see this is attached and this is attached. I do have an edge here, so I'm going to go back and iron that. Once again, the Teflon sheet helps me here because if I go over, it doesn't matter. It'll still stick. And for those who got the February box, I did put a piece of Teflon sheet, so hopefully you've had a chance to try it out if you've never done it before. So I'm just feeling the edges to make sure. So this piece is on. I do not have enough for this piece here. So if I put this here, there's not enough. See that? But what you can do, and I'll show you this also, is you can do, I call it Frankensteining because that's the term that I heard, but you can use pieces of interfacing. And especially because I do it on, I do this for pockets, inside pockets, because nobody sees it. I tend not to do it for outside pieces because I don't want to see any separation by accident on any external pieces. So this piece doesn't fit, but I can see that I have a big long strip here that if I put it to the bottom will fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fuse this piece first, then cut this out and use the other piece. If you cut yours according to the directions, you don't need to do this. This is just a different way. So there's no point in coming to a live for me to tell you exactly what's in the direction. You should be learning even more from a live than what's in the directions. You should learn the directions and then you should learn a little bit more, right? So I'm going to flip that over, line this up. Make sure to leave a space between your two pieces of fabric. I can actually see through this. And I'm going to fuse this. Now this piece has no interfacing on this side, but I will be using the extra piece from this side, and I'll be cutting it out to use that. So like the foam, if you have scraps, save those scraps because you can use them to Frankenstein the pieces. Thank you, Annette. Have you ever used a Teflon sheet before? I know some people do like t-shirts, so they use it for that. Like when they use like their Cricut machine. And the Teflon sheet, by the way, is a baking sheet. So if you just, go grab a couple of baking sheets. You can grab them. These are smaller ones because these are the ones I sent, but you can grab longer ones and cut to size. So you can get those as well. Who needs a coast? That's so funny. I know, exactly. We're all one world, right? So who needs the coast? So I cut this off on the side, this extra piece, and this is where I'm going to do what I call Frankensteining. I guess other people may call it the same thing, but I'm going to take this piece of interface and I'm going to attach it to the bottom here. So I put it about maybe 1/16 of an inch over. Some people put it right next to it. Being that you're not going to see it, I put it over it. If you think you're going to see it, try to get it as close to that edge as possible so that it doesn't create a visible crease. But this is going to be the inside of a pocket, so nobody's going to see it. So I'm going to overlap it about maybe 1/8 of an inch. Okay. See? I'm glad you love it, Arnett, and I'm glad you got to. Arnett, I'm glad you got a chance to try it. Something good. It's like hopefully in the box you guys get to try things you haven't tried before. So now I have this all interfaced. So this piece is going to be my pocket piece. This piece is going to be this is a slip pocket and these are the internal zip pockets. I'm not interfacing the zipper facing, which is this piece. I will not be interfacing that. We don't need to interface that. And I don't interface the straps, although if you want to, you may, but I do not. All right. So now I'm going to iron this. And then I'm going to set this to the side for a moment. I'm going to set this to the side for a moment, and I'm going to iron my straps because I want to be able to sew them and so that I can put my iron away and for no other reason. So the straps, the way you're going to do the straps is you're going to take your strap and you're going to, I don't know what this piece was. That was my facing piece. I was like, I'm looking at it going, this is absolutely wrong. You're going to take your strap, and I'm taking the short one. So I'm taking the one that I'm going to be attaching the slider to. I'm going to fold it in half this way. Okay, there's no interfacing, right? I'm going to then, and I ironed it. I'm then going to fold one long end to the middle like this, and I'm going to iron it. And then I'm going to take the other long end and fold it to the middle, just like this, and iron it. So straps are not very complicated. They're not, honestly, they're something that if people write the pattern for it, it's not like a big secret. Depending on how wide you want your strap, you multiply whatever the final width is by the number 4, if you're going to use this method. So this method, I'm taking, my strap is going to be 1 inch. So I'm taking a 4-inch wide piece of fabric. So it's 1 times 4, which gives me 4 inches. And that's how, when I fold it in 4, because I'm folding it in and folding it in, this width here is going to be 1 inch. So now I'm done, and this will be a 1-inch strap. So if you're using this method and you're making a strap, and that's out of anything, that's out of vinyl, that's out of whatever you're going to make it out of, right? Upholstery fabric, whatever. Whatever the width is of your strap, your final width, you're going to multiply it times 4, and that's how you're going to start out. So it's 4 by whatever length you want your strap to be. And that's if you're using this folding method of doing it, right? And that's what we're doing here. So I just folded it in half, folded the long end, one long end to the middle, ironed it, fold the other long end to the middle, ironed it, and then folded it in half again. So I have one side that's open and one side that's closed. When we sew this, and I'll repeat it when we get to sewing it, I always start sewing it from the open side. So I will sew along the open edge first and then come back and sew the closed edge. The reason I do that is because if you sew the closed edge first and this shifts in any way, you can't fix it. But if you match these two folded edges together like this and sew, then at least you can make minor adjustments over here and it's sealed in. Okay, but if you ever tried and you sewed over here and said, oh, I messed up because now this is a problem, if you do it from the open side first, you don't have that problem. So that's just a little tip. Okay. So I'm going to put this to the side. We're going to use foam for that, but I'm going to put that to the side right now. And then I'm going to take my other piece of my strap. Same thing. I want it to be 1 inch, so I cut it 4 inches wide. I think I cut it 4 inches wide. I keep looking at it going, it looks a little bit short. Okay. I fold it in half. I wasn't particular, like I said, about the strap. I cut this first to make sure I had enough material for the strap. If you ever feel concerned that you may not have enough material, definitely cut your pattern pieces first, because it's probably easier to, make adjustments to make a nice strap than it is that. But I normally cut this first. I don't like sewing straps, so I normally I normally sew my straps last, but tonight I will sew them first and get them out of the way. Overlapping the interfacing, then cutting. Whitney says, I've seen people overlap the interface, then cut and remove the parts cut off so the lines match up perfectly. I've seen people overlap. I don't understand. Is this for the straps or is this for another piece? Whitney, tell me which piece I'm not sure I understand. And I'm guessing if it's for the strap, then I would have had to have interfaced it, but I didn't. And I want to give you, in each box, I try to give you enough material with not a lot of work, although the last box, was it the last bag? Apparently was a lot of work. And so I'm trying to go backwards and make them simpler. But I needed to give you these curves because I wanted to show you that they weren't so hard. But I also try to give you enough material to make a nice bag and not feel like you have to have all this stuff, right? You don't need to have all this stuff to make a nice bag. As you grow in your bag making and you learn more, you will acquire more and more stuff, as we all do in whatever hobby craft that we do. We tend to learn more and more things. But I'm hoping that you can see with a yard of fabric, with some hardware or without hardware, you can actually make a very nice bag. This bag could also be put together. If you didn't have hardware, you can just simply sew the straps into the body of the bag. So if you don't have the hinge connectors, you can sew them into the body of the bag. If you don't have the closure for the front of the bag, you could always use a snap or a button, right, and Velcro. I'm not a fan of Velcro, but you could definitely use a decorative button and some Velcro. So use what you have. But the boxes are a nice way to, get, what you need and learn a technique or a skill and then go from there. And if you want to acquire other things, you can. Okay. It says, so overlap the interfacing like you were discussing. Yes, but then create a new cut. Gotcha. So this is where you're trying to fussy cut, I'm guessing. Is that correct? Interfacing, then make a new cut. That way they match perfectly. I'm going to muddle that one over, Whitney. I'll probably be up half the night and go, oh, yeah, I know what she means now. Because I'm guessing you want to make the interfacing match up so that there's no, like I was doing before, so there's no ridge. Yeah, okay, I got it. So what she was saying is here, 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 here. I actually have an overlap, but what she was saying is she's seen people where they've cut this. Like once I put it here, they overlap it. And then if you cut it where because you can actually see it, you can then peel back this piece here. So if you fuse it down, you can actually cut this piece here and then they'll match perfectly. So if it was on the front of a bag or something like that, then it wouldn't be visible that there was a seam. So you can still Frankenstein on the front if you on a front on a visible part of the bag if you wanted to, right? Because then you would just, I don't know if you can see there's an overlapping piece, a white piece, but if you cut this just right there, and then you can just peel back this piece here, then you would have a perfect joint. And I think that's what she meant. Okay, so I have my straps, and I'm going to come back to those. I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to cut my foam for my straps, and then we'll cut the lining pieces. Okay. So now this is easy enough to cut because I just need to cut the pieces. I do use a ruler to do this because I want to make sure that my line stays straight and it doesn't go wonky on me. So I will use a ruler to do that. Okay, so you make a cut before you fuse. So I think I know. And I'll do it right after I cut these out. Okay. So I believe this is what she's saying. If I take, I can use this. So I keep all my scraps, my interface. So what I'm hearing you say is, let's say I have these two pieces of interfacing, and for whatever reason, yeah, let's take this piece. Just gonna cut this in half, and I'm just gonna cut this like jagged like that. Right. So let's say I have a piece of interfacing, and Whitney, tell me if I'm wrong. You have a piece of interfacing like this, and you have a piece of interfacing like this. If you have a bag that you're going to on the outside, you want to use Frankenstein, you would take both pieces of interface and you would lay them down like this. So smooth them out and lay them down. Then what you can do is wherever they overlap, so there's an overlap in here, right? There is an overlap. You can't see it, but there is. I'm going to cut right here because that is on the overlap of the two pieces right here. So some of the bottom is over here and some of the top is over here. If I cut this straight across like this, I now have some extra from here and some extra here. But by doing that, when I put these two pieces together on the front of the bag, they perfectly align. So that's the way, if you wanted to make sure you were doing it on the front, to make sure that your edges matched up perfectly, you would then do it that way. Because by overlapping these two pieces and then cutting down the middle, you have two straight edges that when you put them together, they should match. See, Whitney, I was going to get it. It took a while for me to get there, but it was going to bug me if I didn't get it. But that's a great tip, Whitney. Great tip. See now? So from now on, I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to find reasons to do it. So I'm just going to cut these out, and then I'm going to go back and this rotary cutter is smaller. It's a smaller rotary cutter. Remember I said I used a bigger one when I have thicker layers, and then I have this one. I have too many rotary cutters. And I have one even smaller than this one. And the reason I'm cutting this off is because I want to make sure that you have to have a clean edge, because you're going to have to align these edges. So no, you can't leave the interfacing on. You got to clean up, the work and get them cut. Okay. All right. So that's that. Here goes my facing, and I'm going to put them all together. All right, so let's talk about the strap for the foam for the straps, and then we'll cut out the lining pieces. And then I think we're almost there. Okay. So in the packet, there was a strap, there was foam for the straps. And I cut them separately only because if you got the box, you could see how fluffy it was. It was very big. It was very, very big. So I had to figure out a way to get everything in there. So this small piece is for this piece of fabric here. It's for this. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this small piece, and this is 1 inch wide. So what I do is I cut it a scant smaller than 1 inch. So I cut it at 7/8 of an inch because I'm only going to put it, if I did it right. Actually, I cut it, sorry, I lay it in the middle here. So the total width of this is 2 inches. So I cut it a little bit smaller so that when I overlap it, these two meet. So instead of cutting this at 2 inches wide, I cut it at 1 7/8 inches wide. Right? Because this has some thickness to it. So if I cut it at the exact amount, then these will be pulling on each other and it's harder to get them to match. So what I do is I cut it at 1 7/8 inches wide. which is just a little bit smaller than the 2 inches. Okay. So I take this, and then that way, if I lay this in here, when I fold these together like this and like this, it's easier for them to meet up on the edge because there's a little bit of wiggle room. Something else I want to mention is this piece is the piece. Sorry, this is the smaller piece. So it's the piece that goes here. What I'm going to do is fold this over so there's a finished edge. This is the only really finished edge that you need. So in the directions, what I have you do for the smaller piece is I want to give you a 1/4 of an inch fold over. So I have you draw a line. Here goes some more math. That's twice the amount of the fold over. So if you want to make the fold over only a 1/4 of an inch, you need to take a 1/4 of an inch, multiply it times 2, which gives you a 1/2 an inch. And you're going to draw a line at a 1/2 an inch, just like this. Now, why am I drawing the line at a 1/2 an inch? Because I'm then going to take my short edge and just fold the short edge down to that 1/4 of an inch, to that 1/2 an inch line. And if you got the box, if you're a founding member, you actually got one of these, which is a Hera marker. And then what you're going to, I have you iron it, but what you're going to do is you're going to press this down. So, all right. So then that'll give me a folded edge. I have you cut this a little bit shorter, so I'm going to cut that down to whatever it is in there. Ask me if I know what it is. Yeah, that should be right. And you're going to place this under that fold over. You're going to fold over that flap, and then you're going to refold these pieces in. So you're going to fold that in towards the middle, and you're going to fold that in the middle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I tell you this in the directions, you can either use double-sided tape, which is what I'm going to use, or you can use a glue stick, or you can use beacon fabric glue and put like a couple of little dots. But I'm just going to put a piece of tape here to be able to hold it. I didn't iron it, so I'm just going to put it here. When you iron it, it stays down. Okay, just like that. And then I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I'm just going to stick it on here. So I'm just going to stick a piece of tape down the middle on the side. You just want it to hold in your phone. That's all it's for. Okay. Okay, and I just peel it off. So I need to take this, lay it in the middle at that fold line that I did, right? Fold this down over the foam. So I'm just going to pull it down and fold it over the foam, just like that. And then because I stuck that double-sided tape in there, I'm just going to move this over. Sorry, I can see that it's not centered. That's what was going on with me. Okay. Then I'm going to fold this in this way and this in this way. And then this is already folded, right? And then what I'm going to do is just fold it again in half, just like that. And I'm going to add clips. You can add another piece of double-sided tape. I'm just going to add clips here to hold it. And I just want this edge to be finished. That was the only reason. You're only going to do this to one edge. You're not going to do it to both edges. And you don't need to do it for the strap. Okay, so for the strap piece, you do not need, for this piece, you do not need to fold over any of those edges because they will get hidden in the hinge. So when you stick them in the hinge, they're going to get hidden in there. So you don't need to finish that. The other raw edge, which is this raw edge here, is going to get hidden in the strap end. So that's why I don't have you finish that off. So you only need to fold one side. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So we've prepared this strap. This is the next strap we need to prepare. I do the same thing with this piece, with this. Remember, you're going to cut it, and this is a little bit more tricky because it's a longer piece. Once again, it does not have to be perfect. Actually take my ruler, and you can draw a line if it's easier, but my ruler, I just line it up with, because I can see under it, with my 1 7/8 inch mark, and I cut it in pieces. So I cut like one piece and I go to the next piece like that. Okay. And so I cut this like this. Then I just move my ruler down. So I do not, and if you guys want to, you can. I don't recommend you folding this in half and cutting it. So don't fold it this way in half and then try to cut through 2 layers. I don't recommend it, but you know, if you guys can make it work. I think you get a more accurate cut, especially with this foam because it's thick, by not doing that. But if you can make it work without, you know, doing that, then. Okay, and then now I know this is my straight edge here. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I know that's my straight edge. However, when I try to line up on this side, it's cut wonky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this side that I know is straight, and then I'm gonna flip it around, right? Because this side's straight now. So now if I flip it around this side, this way, I'll be able to do the 1 7/8. And yeah, because it's only a little bit off. It's not a lot off, but it's a little bit off. Okay. So once again, you can take double-sided tape. You can use a glue stick. I put them away, but oh yeah, right here. Like Staples glue sticks. You can get a whole pack of them at school time. I use them for everything. And we're just going to open this up. Mine is going to be a little bit longer because I know that I cut it longer, but yours will be whatever size is in the directions. You're going to lay this on here. No, I didn't put double-sided tape in this case, but if you need the help, that's what it's for. All right. Then what you can do is you're going to fold these two in like this, and you're going to match those edges like that. So you're going to do that all the way down the full length of this. And I'm just going to take some clips and I'm going to clip them in place. Once again, remember I said I sew this open edge first because that way I know that I have it sealed up, and if I have to adjust the other side, I can. So you're going to do this going all the way down the edge, and we're going to sew the strap. I'll show you how to sew it. I'll sew the smaller one, and then I'll leave you to sew the bigger one because the bigger one is just a straight sew, right? But you can do it exactly the same way. So that's all we're going to do. All right. So you do that, and then you do this. Great. So then that's your straps, and we're going to come back and sew this because I need to go to the sewing machine to show you how to attach the bottom of the bag, the bottom gusset piece. And then once we've done that, we would have, you have a couple of things to do for homework, but then when you come back next time, what we'll do is we'll start putting together the exterior of the bag. Right, so you're going to get your wax canvas. Now, if you are not using wax canvas, you will need, and you're using a cotton, you will need to put interfacing on it. Wax canvas does not require interfacing because the thickness of it is equally as thick, if not a little bit thicker, than using cotton and interfacing. No foam, just cotton and interfacing. The other thing I want to mention about waterproof canvas is it doesn't have any give. So I know you may have, there's some people who have like arthritis, so they may have issues with their hands, not issues, but they may have problems with their hand. Waterproof canvas can be a little bit difficult to work with. And so if you've never worked with it before, there's a couple of things that I want to mention to you. One is it doesn't give. There's no pull or give. You can take an iron, and this is, you should be able to see this because one side is, you see one side is shiny and the other side, well, this side is a plastic side and this side is a fabric side. What you can do is on the fabric side, if you heat it up a little bit by either putting steam or ironing it, it gives it a little bit more drape temporarily. It'll, when it cools off, it'll get back rigid again, but it makes it more pliable. So if you have to, let's say, turn a bag inside out that has waterproof canvas on the lining, you can turn your blow dryer, if you have one, on high and just wave it back and forth inside the bag, which warms up the waterproof canvas and makes it more pliable. It doesn't have give, but it has more drape. It's more flexible and pliable. You can also do, if you can get your iron in there, you can do the same thing with your iron, right? You can use steam, but you must put it on this fabric side. If you iron on this side, it will stick to your iron. And there's a distinct difference. This one is kind of matte and this side is shiny. This is black, so it's you can see it, but all of it is like that, right? So that's something I wanted to mention for those of you who haven't used waterproof canvas before. It is durable. It is a durable material. Even though it says waterproof, if you drop liquid on this, yes, it is waterproof. It's not necessarily stain proof, which is also something I want to make sure I mention. But also keep in mind, if you drop liquid in your bag, you have seams. So even though you line it with waterproof canvas, that liquid could seep into the seams. But as much as possible, it does help to protect your bag and help your bag from, for the most part, not dripping to the outside of your bag, right? So it is a good material. It is durable. I really, really like it a lot. I find that it gives bags more structure and stability. But those are just some things that you should be aware of if you decide you want to give waterproof canvas a try. Okay, so we will be cutting the actual gusset strips. So we need to cut these strips here. We need to cut this bottom piece. The lining pieces are exactly the same as the exterior pieces. We'll need to cut that. And for for the slip pocket, there's actually a back piece, which is also made of waterproof canvas. So only the front is exterior fabric. The back is waterproof canvas. And then we'll also need to cut the flap. All right. So the flap, the exterior, and the back are all the same size as the back, the front, and the flap are all the same dimensions for the lining as they are for the exterior. So those dimensions do not change. The strip in the sides, those will be a little bit shorter. They'll be more narrow, but we're creating them like we do for the like we do a strap. So you'll see that in a minute. So I'm just straightening out. That's what that shaking is that you hear. I'm just straightening out my waterproof canvas. So I'm going to cut in like a couple of pieces, like 4 pieces, and then I'm going to use them for the flap or whatever. So you should have gotten a yard of waterproof canvas in your box. I was going to give you the exact amount, but I figure if you like it, over time, you'll probably get quite a few different colors. There was a terracotta color. We got a gray. I think you got a gray at one point. I'm trying to remember all the colors of the bags. But this one's black. So at least you get to see also, if you order it, you get to see real time what the color actually looks like. All right. So let's get cutting. So front and back. It doesn't matter. Also, there is no like, I don't cut like with grain against grain. I just cut. I just cut. I don't worry. You know, this isn't something because it doesn't have stretch. I don't worry about it. And it doesn't really shrink. It is supposedly fire resistant, mildew resistant, although I don't have any, I don't think I'm going to set fire to it, but, you know, it does have these properties, which are very nice. So I'm just making a straight edge here. And then I'm going to cut my flap and I'm going to cut my other pieces. So. Trying to think. I'm trying to plan. So I'm cutting to the biggest measurement. So I'm actually cutting my flap out first. And this is 4 layers of fabric. So I'm cutting my flap out first. And that's the measurement that I'm using. Also, if this is also good if you're making pouches. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for wallets because it is thick, although they do sell one that's a little thinner than this one. So you can use that one, but I wouldn't recommend it necessarily for a wallet. Okay. So let's do, I'm going to cut my front and my back. So now I have 2 layers of thickness. So I'm cutting the front and the back pieces. I'm going to cut off this edge because we definitely don't want to keep that edge, plus a little bit more just to make sure I get it all cut off. Just making sure I line everything up evenly. So this is going to be my front and my back. So it's front and back. And then I only need for the flap, I only need a single piece. So I'm going to open this up and cut a single piece over on this side. So I'm just trying to get it straight. I have a light over here on the right hand side, so it's interfering with my progress. Okay, so I'm going to cut my flap piece. So I just cut one piece and I cut it to the dimensions of my my front and back flap, and then I'm using that single strip that I have to cut the other pieces. So this will be my flap. And the reason I turned it over is because it's curling, and I want to get it as flat as possible. So that's why I turned it over. It doesn't really matter which side, whether you cut it from the front or the back. It's just that the fabric is curling. This is my flap. Then I need my accent pieces, and my accent pieces, I need my gusset piece. So I'll cut that first and then I'll cut my accent piece. So gusset is the bottom gusset piece. And this is the piece I'm going to take and show you how to attach the foam. Okay, and then I'm going to cut my accent pieces, and my accent pieces are the black strip that goes down the side. So the one that I said looks like a racing stripe. So it's going to be those pieces. And let's see. Trying to see if I can get away, but I don't think so. I can't get away with the. And we're going to need 2 of these accent pieces. There's one. We're going to cut 2 of these. And once we cut this, then what we're going to do is we're going to create the accent piece itself. And we need to cut 1 more piece. Let's see if I have any. We need to cut the piece for the internal pocket. For our internal, and I threw my pieces to the side so I wouldn't lose them, but I have them back. So this piece, we need a backing to it. So that's the other piece that we need to cut. So let's cut that piece, and then we'll talk about the actual strap. The accent pieces, I mean. All right, so I don't have. I just need a piece for this, so I'll just cut this. I'll rough cut it and trim it up with I'll just cut it to the measurement. And you only need a single layer of this, by the way. Okay. And this is the back of that pocket, that slip pocket that was on the inside. So the back piece of that, on the pattern piece, it's called slip pocket lining. So for those of you who want to know what it's called, yep. And you will notice, I also saved this because this is good if you need stiffener inside of a strap because that doesn't have any give. So if you need stiffener inside of, let's say, a wristlet strap, you can lay this down the middle of the strap the same way I did the foam, and it would take the stretch out of, let's say, a cotton piece of fabric if you were doing a cotton wristlet. So I saved these. I also save these for actual straps if I just need something to, like I said, like that long strap that I created. If I wanted to make it non-stretch or not stretch, I would zigzag stitch this together with another piece, and then I'd cut them to the, whatever size width it is, and then I put this in there with double-sided tape, and it takes the stretch out of the strap. So there's nothing worse than you make a strap, and because of the material, over time, depending on how you cut it, it starts to stretch. So you may have started with a strap this long and it ends up being that long. So it's also very good for that because it will stop that stretch. So this piece here, just to explain to you a little bit, will be sewn with this piece, but then when we fold it over, it will give an accent. So these two pieces will go together. Okay. So this piece requires a piece of foam. So this piece was the piece that I mentioned was the bottom, for the bottom of the gusset. So I'm going to cut a piece of foam, in this case, exactly the size. Whereas before I was cutting it smaller, in this case, I'm cutting it exactly the size. Now you can, if you want to, cut this bigger, sew it on, and then trim it. I'm just going to cut it exactly the size. And we will be sewing this. So yes, this foam will be in the seam, but there's no other way to attach it because, like I mentioned before, we don't iron on the back of waterproof canvas because of that plastic. The foam is not thick enough to worry about, so it's okay that we, it's in the seam. And that's because the other piece that we're sewing it to, there is nothing in the seam. So it's totally fine. Okay. Now everybody sews differently. I tend to sew things, I sew them from the foam side and leave the smoother side against the plate as opposed to sewing it from the front side, because I find that this foam sometimes can get caught up in my feed dogs. So what I do is I turn it face down and then I stitch around this way. When you're stitching the foam on, we're going to use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And the reason we use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance is because we want to make sure that we don't have to take it out. If you baste it in and you use, 1/4 of an inch or something, you're gonna have to come back and take out those stitches so that you don't see them in your work. I use 1/8 because I just want to tack it in there, and I don't want to have to come back and take it out. I do enough. I think we all do enough work with making the bag that we don't want to have to come back and redo it. So that's those pieces. Let's talk about the accent pieces a little bit, and then we'll do a little bit of sewing. I was so good at cleaning up, I put them away. Okay. So these are the accent pieces. So the way we're going to do is we're going to do these similar to the way that we did the strap, but we're going to do some folding, but it's a little bit different. So I'm not going to put any foam in here at all or anything like that. What I am going to do is I'm going to fold it in like we did to the middle with the other one. So you can use a chalk liner, you can use, whatever you want, but you're going to measure and draw a center line straight down the middle. So if we look here, if you draw a straight line down the middle, that'll be at the 1-inch mark. So I can see that I have a line going straight down the middle. So it's 1 inch from either the left or the right hand side. Whichever one is easier for you to do. All right. Some people like drawing the other. So I'm going to draw a line. Just like that. And I can do the same thing to this side. We're drawing that line, by the way, on the wrong side of the fabric, not the right side, on the wrong side, because we're going to fold into the wrong side. So this is where your double-sided tape or your glue comes in handy. Um, I prefer double-sided tape, like I mentioned before. I'm going to take a piece and I'm just going to put it like right in the middle. So if this is my middle, which is 1 inch, at a half an inch, about a half an inch, this is not exact. Or actually, sorry, I'm going to put a piece on one side close to that line that I drew, that I was doing a different strap, close to the line. And I'm going to put another piece on the opposite side, about maybe an eighth or a quarter of an inch in from the other side. So there's two pieces that I have. You can do it down the middle if yours. This is a half an inch thick, and I find that for me, when I fold them in, it doesn't hold the ends so well. So I use two pieces. There is a 1/8 inch, and then I know some people have a 1 inch thick piece. So figure out what what works for you. If you don't have double-sided tape, what I would say to you is fold this in half, wrong sides together. Give it a good crease so you can actually see that crease, because you're going to have to fold to it. And then you're going to fold this in to that crease line, just like that. And if you don't have double-sided tape, then use clips to hold it in place. But make sure when you're pushing it down that you actually give it a good, like a good press, because it won't want to stay down. All right. And you're going to do that the full length if you don't have double-sided tape. Like I said, grab a couple of those glue sticks next time you're in, like what's that, Office Max or or Staples or one of those places, because they do come in handy. Okay. So now you can also use Beacon. If you have Beacon glue, just put little dots. Don't put a whole strip. You just need it to hold it down. So now I'm going to fold this over to that line that I drew down the center, just like that. And I'm just pressing it with my hand. The tape does hold it, so I don't have to worry about it, but the tape does hold it. And this is a low tack tape. And what I like about it is it doesn't really gum up your machines as much as like some of the other tapes may. All right. So now I'm going to peel off the other side, this side. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to fold this to the middle as well, just like that. So the two should touch right in the middle. There's no foam or anything. It's just the waterproof canvas. There's no interfacing. We don't interface waterproof canvas. We just fold it to the middle. If you need to, by all means, add clips to hold it in place. And when you're done, that should be your strip. It should measure 1 inch wide. And that strip is going to lay directly on top of the side gusset piece. Let me find it here for you guys. Note to self, don't clean up until you're done. I'll show you as an example. Okay, so what this strip is going to do is when we have our side gusset piece, it's going to go, this is not the side gusset piece, but if it would go on that side gusset piece, we're going to attach this to the bottom, and then we're going to have at the bottom here another side gusset piece with this also. So that's how it's going to get connected. So this is the accent piece. Sorry, 1 second. To the website, went into sewyourBag.com. Okay. All right. So I'm going to check after this. Somebody's having a problem getting the pattern. I will check right after this call. Right after this call. Been on calls all day. Right after the live. I will check for you on the pattern. Not even if I have to add it to your account. We'll get it in there for you. Not an issue. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with this. I know I put away my double-sided tape. Once again, if you want, you can also put it on the edge here because it'll keep it out of it's not going to be in the seam line. So, because the seam line is going to be like right where the fold is. So if you want, you can put it on the edge if that's easier for you. This one actually rips pretty easy also. It's not like very hard to rip. It's a little bit hard sometimes to peel, but not hard to rip. And then we're going to do this one as well. So we're just going to fold that into the middle. Once again, it should be an inch. Listen, if it's 7/8 of an inch, if it's if it's just shy of an inch, don't drive yourself crazy. Just make them both. The only thing I say is make them both the same width. Okay. You can, and I know somebody will probably ask, can you just use it without folding it? Yes, you can use it without folding it. What I would say to you is that put some fray check on the edge of it if you would like. If anybody decides they want to give it a try, your machine does vinyl. You don't need to fold it if it's vinyl. You can just cut a 1-inch strip and lay it down. So you don't need to fold it. I like using vinyl that's almost the same color as so if you use black, try to find a vinyl that has a black underside of it. Just so you don't see, because some of them the vinyl is underside is white. What you can do is you can edge paint it, but I've also seen people take a Sharpie, a black Sharpie or whatever color, and match it and just draw the Sharpie, a permanent Sharpie. Make sure you get to the back and they draw, a line in the back, and then they draw along the edge with the Sharpie. So I've seen people do that as well. But if you find a vinyl that the backing is the same color, or it's a backing you like, maybe you like the white accent, or you can do the double fold with vinyl. You could do it the same way I did it here. But you don't have to. If you're using cork, absolutely you do not have to fold cork. Don't waste cork by folding it to do something like this. I would just cut the cork and sew it. Since we're going to sew this at 1/8 of an inch, for something like cork, you probably won't even notice the edge that's exposed. So that's why I wouldn't even bother with cork. Okay, so those are done. These are going to get attached to your side gusset piece. These are going to get attached after you fused on your foam. So your interface and your foam need to be attached to the side gusset piece for tomorrow, because then we'll add these after all of that's done. So all of your interfacing should be done when we start the next part, which is the exterior. So let's talk about how to sew this and attach this. So this is, we're using the sew-in foam as a sew-in. And the other thing I want to mention to you is just because you use the one that has the glue on it, so you may use, I think it's called 91F. I'm trying to remember the number is. But if you use the foam that has the fusible part on it, you don't have to fuse it because it has fuse on it. You can just use it as a sew-in. So that's also something to be aware of. So if that's all you have, then use what you have. You don't need to fuse it. Like I said, I find that I have gotten inconsistent results with the foam that fuses, because if you don't fuse it right the first time, you will see that you get bubbles, right? So you'll have pockets where it looks like it's not fused, especially on cotton, where it looks like it's not fused, and it's very hard to get it to refuse. So that's just something to be aware of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to do a little, we're going to hope, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that when I get to the sewing machine, that, it's very kind to me and it doesn't trip anything out, and the camera works and the sound works. So I'm going to ask you guys to keep me honest and make sure that that is actually, that's actually working. So hopefully you can see my machine. Hopefully the sound is still good. And let's see. I think I unplugged it. Give me 1 second, technology. At least this is something I can solve real easy. Okay. So hopefully you can see the sewing machine. If you can't see it, let me know. I will definitely, I hope the sound is good as well. Good. Thank you, Whitney. Okay. So now we're going to sew this on. I'm going to sew this shorter strap, but what I'm doing here, you're going to do the same for the long strap. You don't need to see me sew a long strap. Clip on here. Okay. So I'm going to start, like I said, from the open side. So this is my open side. I'm starting from the bottom. I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching. So you can do 1 row of stitching if you want. I do 2. I'm starting with a 1/4 of an inch. And the reason I'm starting with 2 rows is because not everybody is comfortable with with sewing at 1/8 of an inch, which is what I normally do. So if you only get comfortable with a 1/4 of an inch for now, that's fine. And then you can, as you practice and get better, you can work on the 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to do 2 rows though. So I'm going to do a 1/4 of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch stitch. Okay. So I put my stitch length to between a 4 and a 5, a 4 and a 4.5. That's because this is considered top stitching, right? It's not sewing. It's more decorative than sewing. A 1/4 of an inch for me is the edge right here, right over here of my presser foot. So you can check from your needle to the edge to see what a 1/4 of an inch is. On most machines, domestic machines, the standard width of the foot that comes with your machine is about a 1/4 of an inch. So that's just something, but you can, measure it. So now my pedal's not giving me. Okay. So I'm going to go forward. Oops. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to back tack. And I'm going to go forward again at a 1/4 of an inch. When I get to this end, and I'm almost a 1/4 of an inch away from the end, over here, almost a 1/4 of an inch, because I want to sew across at a 1/4 of an inch. I want to sew across at a 1/4 of an inch. I want to leave the needle down in a down position, lift your presser foot up and rotate. Now I need a little bit more because I'm over here, I'm like about 1/8 of an inch away. So I can either take a full stitch, so I can go 1 more stitch, lift the presser foot and rotate, and I'm right there. If you don't get right there, or you think that you need a little bit more, you can always shorten your stitch length down to like a 3 or a 2, and then turn it back up once you get there. So you can shorten it nobody's going to know. Shorten it at the corners and make it longer later. I'm going to sew across. I think it's about 3 or 4 stitches across. Lift my presser foot, rotate again 90 degrees, put the presser foot down, and stitch all the way to the bottom. You can see I caught the edges here. I caught them in here because I folded it all the way to the middle. But you can also see over here, if I had to adjust it, I could. And that's why I said, I always start with the open end. Okay, and I'm at the bottom. You can back tack. I need to do that 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to come forward. I cut my thread by accident, but you're going to come forward. You're going to lift, you're going to rotate, and you're going to sew across. For those of you doing 1/8 of an inch, until you get to your within 1/8. Now for me, when I rotate it, 1/8 of an inch for me is the inside of my presser foot right here. So right in here is an 1/8 of an inch. This is a 1/4, that's an 1/8. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stitch down the long side. And you should get a pretty puffy little strap here. When I get to about 1/8 of an inch, which is about near the corner, I'm going to leave the needle down, lift my presser foot, rotate, drop my needle, stitch across, lift my presser foot, rotate again, and stitch down. And then I will back tack at the bottom. So I don't know if you guys, but I have my pedal is not liking me tonight. But I can't complain because the technology is working great. I'm not complaining. So I'm going to cut it. The reason I say that is because I press the back of my machine. If you press the back of the pedal, it actually cuts the thread. So now if you look at it, that's what it should look like, right? So we've stitched it across the top. I've done 2 rows of stitches. Like I said, if you're not comfortable and you can only do 1 row of stitches, that's fine. I have some orange thread in there, so you'll see the orange thread, so you can see the back, and I sewed across the top. All right, so that's going to be your strap. We're going to set that aside. Tomorrow we'll talk about how to add the hardware to this, but just do your long strap, and we'll attach the hardware as we go through the bag. For the foam, for the piece that we have to sew the foam, I'm going to turn my stitch length up to a 6, which is the longest stitch. So whatever the basting stitch is on your machine, that should be a pretty long stitch, 6, 9, 7, 8, whatever it is. You turn it up there. And we're going to stitch at 1/8 of an inch. So remember I said I stitch at 1/8 of an inch so I don't have to take the stitches out. My stitch length, my seam allowance is actually going to be 1/4 of an inch. So it's right outside of that. If you want to stitch at 1/4 of an inch, you're then going to have to go back in later on and remember to remove those basting stitches. So that's why I stitch at 1/8. So it's up to you. Whatever makes you comfortable, that's what you should do. Once again, my 1/8 of an inch is the inside where my needle is, the inside right for me. If you're stitching from the other side, because some people stitch from this side, it'll be the inside left. All right. I stitch from this side, so that's why it's the right for me. And I'm just going to stitch around, right? So just stay within that. When you get to about 1/8 of an inch at the other end, lift your presser foot, needle in the down position, pivot it. Go to the other corner, 1/8 of an inch, lift the needle, pivot. Lift, pivot. And then I do back tack at the end and cut your thread. So now you'll see the front, that's the back, and it glides easier for me if I put the foam, like I said, down. If I turn it this way, then the foam. But you can see I have orange thread going all the way around, so you can see it's like 1/8 of an inch going all the way around. So I can show you. All right. So that's what it's going to look like when you're done. And we'll go back now to the cutting mat. Actually, we'll go back to me, I guess. So here I am. I'm still here. Not an out-of-body experience or anything like that. So we did a lot tonight. We did the prepping. There is some prepping that you still, have yet to do. One thing I didn't cut, and I just realized I didn't cut it, because somebody didn't tell me, is I didn't cut the strip for the gusset. So let me just cut that right now very quickly with you guys, just because I want to show you exactly what it is you're cutting and how it comes together in the bag, so you get a good sense of it. So I didn't show you how I cut the gusset piece for the lining. The outside is 3 pieces, so the outside is 1, 2, 3, but the inside here is just one long piece. It is a rectangular piece, so let's cut that out. That's very quick to cut, so we can cut that out real quick. But I want to give you, tell you how it's cut. And then we will talk about, we want to make sure that we do a couple more cuts, and that's to our rounded edges. And then we should be done. So that main, it's called, what's it called? It's called lining gusset is what it's called in the pattern. So for those of you following along with the pattern, it's called lining gusset. And I am going to attempt to cut this just like this, fully up. And remember I said it's just a strip. It's nothing, there's no curves in it. So for those of you who think there are curves, there's no curves in it. one long strip, just like that. Okay. And it's going to be good as it is that it's this way. Super easy. Just gonna get it straight. So that's it. It's just one long strip, just like that. And the way this works is when we put together the lining front and back, because we don't, it's only one piece, this is going to go together like this. So that's how it's going to go together, right? So that's why it's just one long strip. And then we just have the front and we have the back that we attach. But as you can see, just me gently laying it on here, you can see that it molds around that curve. It just naturally molds around the curve. So we'll talk about that, but this is the piece that we forgot. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to take our lining pieces that we have for our flap and for our front and back, and we need to round those corners. So let's do that also. So remember, there is a left and a right. Um, use a chalk line if you can't see on the black. I'm just going to use a rotary cutter. And remember, I said that when I cut these out, another way that you can cut a curve, if you ever have to cut a curve, is you don't have to cut it all at once. You can cut slices. So you can cut like this, that cut that edge, cut like this. And within about 3 cuts, you can get like the curve. So if you ever need to cut a curve, you don't have to cut around because the blade doesn't cut in a circular motion. It doesn't bend. So, and on these pieces, once again, you just have to cut either the top or the bottom. You don't cut both. And good thing is there's no interfacing on these. The reason that I also told you that if you wanted to use the waterproof canvas and not do the fold, the reason that I told you to put fray check is because there is a fabric component to it. And it does, over time you'll keep having to pull like pieces off. Whereas if you use a little bit of fray check, if you're not, folding it, that'll stop that. I don't know if you can see it, it's like right here. There's this little piece, but if I pull it, it keeps. And then over time, you'll get another piece that comes off. So that's why I told you to use fray check, because there is a fabric component to this. And okay, I think we cut all of our pieces. So that was all of the pieces. This is the flap, lining pieces, bottom gusset. This is the bottom part of our adjustable strap. This I'll go back and fix with the double-sided tape, but these are our accent pieces. This was for our pocket on the inside of our bag, right? So this piece was for the slip pocket on the inside of our bag. And this is the exterior piece. Lining, that's it. Yes, I put everything to the side over here. And we have pocket, lining, and the pocket, and the zipper facing, I call it in the pattern. Front and back, you will complete the other piece just like you did this piece. So you'll interface this and add the foam for tomorrow. And then this, you will also add the interfacing. This is the gusset piece. And this is another piece that you will add the foam and the interfacing. So you have, I think, three pieces. If you didn't follow me tonight or that I didn't do tonight, there are three pieces that you have to do, along with completing your strap, your main strap construction. So the main part of the strap, that still has to be sewn. So that should take you maybe 5 minutes or so to do. It's a long strap. I don't want to bore you by having you watch me do the strap construction. So that should be it. When it comes to the bag, tomorrow we will be constructing the exterior of the bag. We will only be adding one piece of hardware that we need to add in order to prep it for putting it together. So we'll do the flap, the side gusset accent. So it's three pieces to get the side gusset accent, the flap, the hardware. Um, Tomorrow, and then we'll also attach the hardware for our strap to prepare it for the next day. So we'll try to get all of those pieces for the exterior done tomorrow, and then on the third day, which in our case will be Sunday, um, on that third day, we will do the lining and then put everything together. So it may be a little bit, maybe not longer, maybe shorter, I don't know. But, it is, I'm trying to break it down in such a way that it's clearly understood by everybody and you can take it in pieces. I'm not sure if I can go back on YouTube and put the segments in on where I talk about things because I talk about a lot of things. Um, but I'm not sure if I can do that easily, but if I can, I will. And we'll see how we go. So I thank everybody who joined me. I thank those people who joined me on YouTube and let me know that everything was working. It's great to be able to broadcast to two places at one time and be able to support those people who work better on YouTube than they do in a private group. I'm very grateful for everybody who asks questions because that also helps those people who may be a little bit shy and not want to ask questions. But there were so many great tips here. We talked about the few how to make interfacing even if you wanted to Frankenstein it. Um, Whitney asked also another question about quilting, and these are all good questions. And also questions that help me know what kinds of things people are interested in, so that I can produce more content for you guys. So I wish everybody a wonderful evening. Have a great night, and we will definitely talk tomorrow.